Chapter 454. Most of the time, Liszt was an ordinary person who liked to think about the future, but had no long-term plans. It was a bit like the monkey in the primary school Chinese textbook, who picked up sesame and threw away the watermelon. Of course, he would not do something like throwing away watermelons, but he kept picking up things along the way, wanting to pick up everything. There were a lot of projects carried out in the territory, almost more than the Count's Coral Island. However, the problem was that each industry had not been seriously developed. All of them had their heads raised, and then they were placed to the side, maintaining a state of not withering. Of course, it was because he was poor and did not have the manpower to develop them, but also because he did not have a long-term plan and did not know how to focus on the distribution of industries. In addition, he liked to find trouble, but did not have the patience to do the best, leading to the current situation. He obviously had good cards in his hand, but he could not put together a bomb. However, Liszt also had advantages in his character. He was adaptable and could quickly integrate into the new environment. He was diligent, mainly in cultivating qi and potions. He insisted on his own opinion and did not turn back until he hit the wall. He bravely moved forward, and as long as he made up his mind, he would do it immediately. For example, right now, he fully displayed his bravery and insistence on his own opinion. He released a large amount of fire dragon magic that had just been extracted and watched as it was constantly devoured by the fire dragon bones. Even if his heart was bleeding, his movements still did not stop. "Let's do it. I don't believe that I can't smash out a small fire dragon." Cans of fire dragon magic poured out, and the fire dragon bones, like a bottomless pit, constantly devoured the fire dragon magic. On the surface, the retainer knight broke the bubbles of the newly mined volcanic glass one by one and released the fire dragon magic, which the 5 dragon bones greedily absorbed. It took nearly a week to collect. The release took only 2 hours. The fire dragon magic was exhausted. The so-called dragon bone magic array still did not condense the imagined fire seed composed of magic. This was the content of the smoke mission reward. Liszt believed that it had a great connection with the small fire dragon and was likely to be the seed that gave birth to the small fire dragon. The role of the dragon bone magic array was probably to condense such a fire seed. The smoke mission has not been completed, which means that the fire dragon magic is not enough. Liszt took out the bone hammer and hit the fire dragon bones hard. With every strike, the scarlet magic threads would appear densely. The fire dragon's bones looked as if they were on fire, forming 5 huge flaming pillars. It was a magnificent sight. However, the flames did not rise in the end, and the magic threads were still magic threads. But it's still not enough. Continue mining volcanic glass. While ordering his subordinates to continue mining volcanic glass, Liszt called Virginia Truth and explained his actions in detail. He almost revealed all the magic of the fire dragon in order to get useful clues. After all, according to the smoke mission, Virginia had the clues. "Viscount Lister, when I was alive, I was just an ordinary magician. My family was engaged in the production of dragon bones. Basically, I worked according to the instructions of the great magician." Virginia walked around the dragon bone and thought about it for a while, but she still couldn't come up with anything. Liszt was unwilling to give up. "Think about it again," she sighed. "I don't want to talk about it, but if my sister, Curtis Truth, was still around, she would definitely know about these 5 dragon bones. She was most passionate about studying dragons." "Curtis?" Liszt's mind suddenly flashed with inspiration. "Curtis is dead, but she still has a relic." "Yes, she left a book, to His Royal Highness Annette Curtis Truth." He took back Virginia. He quickly took out the magic pen notebook and kept flipping through it, trying to find useful information. However, the entire magic notebook recorded a large number of experiments on making liches and experiments on ghost ships, but there was no mention of information related to dragons. He closed the notebook. Liszt frowned. There is no information related to dragons in the book, and Virginia has no more clues. Is there no other way but to continuously increase the magic of the fire dragon? I always feel that the magic in the fire dragon's bones is enough, but it is missing something. What is missing? When his eyes swept across the cover of the magic notebook, he suddenly had an epiphany. I know what is missing is the soul. The magic circle can gather the magic of the fire dragon and use it as fuel to condense the magic fire seed, and even breed the small fire dragon. But it is missing the soul. Material, spirit, and magic, these are the three basic elements that make up the world in the mage's cognition. Now the dragon bone magic circle has magic and the dragon bone as a material foundation, but it lacks the spiritual support. Legend has it that the dragon's soul lives in the dragon's teeth, but Liszt could not find the dragon's teeth. But he remembered. In his gem space, there are several soul-related items: the sapphire dragon bow, the sheephead flag, and the soul-sinking wood. They are all between reality and illusion. Can these things condense a soul through the dragon bone magic circle? He decided to give it a try and took out a piece of soul-sinking wood. The soul-sinking wood was intact in the gem space. As soon as it was taken out, it immediately began to tremble and collapse, as if it had never existed. However, after Liszt cast magic eyes, he found a faint magic flowing into the dragon bone along with the air. It really works. The dragon bone magic circle can absorb this material. The soul-sinking wood is a material made by Curtis Truth after he sacrificed the souls of a ship's crew. It is closely related to the soul. Next, he kept taking out the soul-sinking wood, and all the materials were swallowed up by the dragon bone. When he hammered the dragon bone again, he clearly felt that when the magic threads appeared, there seemed to be a little more agile, but it was still not enough. He could not condense a fire seed composed of magic. At this time, only the sheephead flag and the sapphire dragon bow were left. He took out the sheephead flag first, and it quickly collapsed and was absorbed. Still not enough, but it felt like it had reached the critical point. Finally, the sapphire dragon bow was taken out, and after it collapsed, it was absorbed by the dragon bone. Liszt took a deep breath, lifted the bone hammer, and hammered it hard on the dragon bone. One hammer after another. With each hammering, the magic was more agile, no longer fleeting, but stayed on the surface of the dragon bone, forming complex fiery red lines. This change made Liszt overjoyed, and he continued to hammer, and the fiery red lines continued to enrich on the surface of the dragon bone. Finally, the 24th hammer hammered down. There was a loud explosion. The dragon bone suddenly burst into a raging fire, and the flames at the tips of the 5 dragon bones quickly gathered together, forming a bright small fireball. Then all the flames on the dragon bone moved toward the small fireball. The temperature in the crypt under the collapsed sinkhole suddenly rose. Liszt had to dodge to the side. Then he saw that the originally thick dragon bone seemed to shrink, or as if it had all turned into flames, and finally gathered in the small fireball. The flames came quickly, and quickly went away. In less than half a minute, the raging fire was extinguished. The 5 dragon bones had disappeared, leaving only 5 faintly visible channels leading to the ground. In the center of the original dragon bone tip, a small fire seed, floating in the air, emitting a flame about the size of a candle. Is this a fire seed composed of magic? Liszt approached cautiously. He couldn't feel the temperature, and the temperature of the previous fire also dropped rapidly, and the crypt soon returned to normal temperature. He didn't have the mind to pay attention to where the dragon bones went, and he just kept circling around the little magic fire seed to observe. In any way, it looked like an ordinary flame. The inside was as bright as the sun, and the outside was as red as blood. Is it breeding a little fire dragon? Liszt was curious. He knew that this magic fire seed was extraordinary, but he couldn't see it with the naked eye. Using magic eyes, it looked the same shape, a simple candle-like flame. He cautiously extended the handle of the bone hammer and let the fire seed burn the handle of the hammer. But, after the flame burned, the handle of the bone hammer was intact, as if the flame had no power at all. Liszt tried other concentrated materials, which also failed to cause damage, and even thick bast paper could not be burned. He also touched the flame with volcanic glass and found that it would not be broken. It was completely different from the previous fire dragon magic. No temperature, can't burn, what kind of existence is it? After repeated experiments to determine that it was almost harmless, Liszt couldn't help but want to touch it himself. He really couldn't control his curiosity. His fingers stretched out carefully, and when his fingertips just touched the flame, he only felt a blur in front of him, and the magic fire seed had already drilled into his fingers. Liszt was so scared that he hurriedly shook his hand and wanted to throw the fire seed out. But the fire seed ran at a high speed along the chi meridians in his body, and in the blink of an eye, he felt it appear in his heart. Then there was a piercing pain, and he felt his heart was burning. His head buzzed and he lost consciousness. Chapter 455. The flames were burning fiercely. Liszt woke up from his coma and found himself in an underground lava cave. There was a rock floating in the magma under his feet. The scorching temperature made him sweat profusely. The bubbling magma, coupled with the endless flames around him, made him feel as if he had fallen into the abyss of hell. He wanted to circulate the chi in his body to resist the scorching atmosphere in the air, but he felt that he could not muster any strength. He could not even pull out the sky cutter sword on his back. What's going on? Liszt was shocked. His mind was a little buzzing and blank. At this moment, the flames in front of him suddenly parted. Then, a huge head stretched out of the flames. It was a head the size of a house. Its reddish-brown skin was stained with flames. It was triangular in shape and had 5 curved horns. The scales were clearly visible. There were also 2 eyes flashing with golden flames on the left and right, and a slightly opened bloody mouth. Sharp teeth were arranged in order. The tongue could not be seen, but flames could be seen flickering in and out of it. The head stopped less than 10 meters in front of Liszt. The golden flames in its eyes looked at Liszt in a humane manner. Everything below the neck was in flames and could not be seen clearly. But Liszt still recognized at a glance that it was a dragon's head, the head of a fire dragon. At first glance, it was ugly and ferocious. Upon closer inspection, every line was extremely rhythmic, full of a strange sense of power and beauty. This was an image that no creature could have. It could only appear on a dragon. Trembling was not enough to describe Liszt's current mood. Facing the fire dragon's head, he only wanted to turn around and escape. He had no ambition to ride a dragon in the past. But at the critical moment, his legs went soft and he could not move. It was as if he had been cast with the body-fixing spell, or as if his legs were not his own. He was very frightened. Other than the Dragon Knight and the magic shooter, perhaps no one could overcome their fear when facing a dragon. However, in addition to fear, his mind was more blank and his thinking was not very flexible. He did not feel the pressure of the dragon's might, but his body was no different from those animals that were frightened by the dragon's might. The dragon's head continued to stare at him. He stood on the rock, not daring to move. The surrounding flames were still burning, and the magma was still bubbling. But very soon, Liszt's mind gradually became clear. He gradually recalled that he seemed to have woken up from a coma. However, this was not the place where he had fainted. Instead, he had fainted in a collapsed sinkhole. Yes, I activated the Dragon Bone magic array and condensed a fire seed made of mana. Then that fire seed burrowed into my body and ran to the position of my heart. It seems to have burned my heart. Something's wrong. Am I dead or alive? His thoughts were still a little chaotic. However, as he took a few deep breaths and carefully combed through his thoughts, he finally sorted out the current situation. Either I'm dead, and everything is a scene of hell after death, or the magic fire seed has caused magma to erupt and fill up the collapsed sinkhole, or all of this is just an illusion in my coma, and I'm being affected by the magic fire seed. After a person died, without any accidents, there would probably be nothing left. Only in a few cases would one become a soul. There was no such thing as hell in this world. The soul either existed like Virginia or went to the land of exile. Therefore, the current scene was not in line with the scene after death. As for the magic fire seed causing magma to erupt, and even the emergence of a fire dragon, it was even more unreasonable. Black Horse Island was indeed a volcanic island, but the volcano had been dead for many years, and the fire dragon had long been left with only a few wreckage. There was no reason for such a huge fire dragon to be born again. So the current scene is just a dream in my coma? Thinking of this, Liszt suddenly felt the fear and pressure that bound him suddenly dissipate. He regained control of his body. His back was straight. He pulled out the sky cutter sword and looked coldly at the fire dragon's head that was still staring at him. His voice was cold. "You are the projection of the magic fire seed. It's a very strange state. My body is still in a coma, but my mind is in such a real environment. Even this illusory body is so real." The fire dragon's head shook slightly, and its golden flame-like eyes flashed with a dangerous light. Its mouth gradually opened, and there was a flame as hot as the sun brewing inside. It seemed that it would spit out the dragon's breath at any time and burn Liszt into slag. But Liszt was not afraid. He confirmed his guess from another point of view. This fire dragon had no dragon's might at all, it was just an empty shell. He had personally felt the invisible dragon's might. The scalp-tingling, breathless dragon's might left a deep impression. The fire dragon in front of him did not have this roar. The fire dragon did not spit out its dragon's breath. Instead, it let out a harsh dragon's roar. It was very sharp, very strange, and it was impossible to describe what this roar sounded like. Liszt did not cover his ears. He just lifted the sky cutter sword to deal with the possible crisis. Even though he guessed that this was a dream affected by the magic fire seed, he still did not relax. If he did not leave this place, it meant that there would be danger at any time. Fortunately, the danger did not happen. After the roar, the eyes of the fire dragon's head once again fluctuated with a trace of inexplicable meaning. Then, it slowly shrank back into the flames and disappeared without a trace. Then, the surrounding flames began to extinguish, and the surrounding magma began to darken, and everything suddenly fell into darkness. The high temperature disappeared. Liszt also felt a burst of exhaustion, closed his eyes, and dozed off. Hunger. Extreme hunger. There was an uncontrollable desire to eat himself to relieve the hunger. Suddenly opening his eyes, Liszt woke up to the expulsion of hunger. His mind was groggy, and only the idea of hunger was the strongest. He resisted the growling protest of his stomach, and looked around. A crystal lamp emitted light, barely illuminating the surroundings. It was a collapsed sinkhole in the crypt. It was just that the 5 dragon bones that had originally pierced and had disappeared, leaving 5 channels leading to the surface, with a slight light coming in. Huh! He breathed a long sigh of relief. It was really just a dream affected by the magic fire seed. I'm really hungry. No, I have to eat something. He couldn't wait to take out the World of Warcraft meat and dragon milk from the gem space, eating and drinking. After eating about 5 pounds of World of Warcraft meat and 3 large cups of dragon milk, he felt the hunger slightly go away, and his mind was completely awake. What's wrong with me? I'm afraid the amount of food I ate in one breath is equivalent to the amount of my daily meals. He rubbed his bulging stomach, very surprised. His appetite was huge, and one meal was equivalent to 2 or 3 meals for others. After all, the knight's chi production needs to be provided by the food he eats. Even if his cultivation of the chi secret skill, Aura Decay, can effectively control the speed of qi loss, he still has a huge appetite. However, he pays great attention to healthy and reasonable diet and rarely overeat. He tries to increase the number of meals instead of eating as much as possible. Chapter 456. He thought of the magic kindling. There was a sudden heat in his chest, and he could clearly feel that there was something more in his heart. He ran his body with all his strength, trying to guide this thing out of his heart, but several attempts ended in failure. The magic kindling stayed in his heart and was not ready to leave. Liszt had a serious expression on his face. His body had been invaded by the mana kindling. Although he had regained consciousness, it did not make him feel at ease. What the hell did I throw out? Can this mana kindling give birth to a little fire dragon? He thought to himself. Does it have a negative effect in my heart? Unable to drive it away, Liszt could only try to comfort himself. He quickly called out the smoke mission. Completed the mission, reward is a magic kindling. The mission has been completed. The magic kindling was indeed the reward of the smoke mission, but the reward method was somewhat unexpected. If it is the reward of the smoke mission, the magic kindling should not cause damage to my body, right? Liszt thought to himself. So far, the rewards of the smoke mission have been benefits, and there has been no harm. It can be seen that the magic kindling is also a benefit, but how to use its benefits, he has not yet understood. In a flash, the smoke changed into a new serpentine. Mission: the magic kindling has been obtained. The most valuable thing in Black Horse Island has been obtained by you. The collapsed sinkhole has become a huge hidden danger in the territory. It can collapse at any time and threaten the safety of the people. Please solve the hidden danger of the collapsed sinkhole. Reward: the restlessness of the rubber worm. Oh! Seeing the new mission, Liszt's eyes lit up. The magic kindling is the most valuable thing in Black Horse Island, so it may really involve the fire dragon. As Virginia said, it is the key to the fire dragon reincarnation. That is to say, there may be a future fire dragon living in my body? He was very excited when he thought about it. But after the excitement calmed down, he could not help but feel a headache. It takes so much to condense a magical kindling. Almost half of the volcanic glass ore on Black Horse Island was mined, and only then was it enough to make up the dragon's magic. There is also a special soul item taken from the ghost ship. If he wants to breed a fire dragon, there was probably going to be a huge expenditure waiting for him in the future. Strictly speaking, the mana spark should only be one part of the fire dragon chain quest. Let me do the math. Standing in the cave, Liszt was not in a hurry to go up. He began to count the number of smoke missions he had completed. Including the completed and altered missions, there were a total of 83 missions in the past 1.5 years. Among them, the tasks related to the fire dragon started from the 36th task, migration of 100 serfs to settle on Black Horse Island, and the reward was 5 rotten dragon bones. Next was the 38th mission, which was to raise more than 1,000 chickens in the flower town. The reward was a fire attribute core mineral vein, which was volcanic glass. Then, he came to the 71st quest, waiting for the Battle of Iron Hoof Island to end. The reward was the recovery of the decaying dragon bone. Then there was the 77th mission, mining 10 tons of volcanic glass. The reward was the rubber worm's agitation. Mission number 78. Infuse the fire dragon's magic power into the dragon bone. Reward: powder conch that produces powder pearls. The 82nd mission was to create glass product. The reward was to collapse the sinkhole. Mission number 83. Obtain Virginia's clues. Reward: magic tinder. Of these 7 missions, some of them were related to the fire dragon, and some of them were related to the fire dragon. Basically, they could be regarded as part of the fire dragon chain mission. If you look into it seriously, there are probably missions that can be related to the fire dragon, such as several missions related to Virginia. Mission number 27. Find out the reason for the coldness of the damaged sunken ship. The reward was to fix the dragon bone, which hid the 36D ghost. Mission number 57. Collect the black pearls of the ring-shaped reef. The reward was to restore the memory of the 36D ghost and become Virginia Truth. Mission number 65. Set foot on Iron Hoof Island. The reward was to wake up Virginia. With so many missions, it was obvious that they did not exist alone. Many missions intersected with other chain missions, forming a complicated thread of fate. If List did not master the smoke mission and get the golden finger of fate, he would have missed many of the rewards. It was the influence of the thread of fate that made a seemingly unrelated reward gradually accumulate and eventually lead to a greater reward. A fire dragon. I must be in the middle of the fire dragon chain mission, but there are many missions and I can't complete them all in one go. Now, the reward of the 84th smoke mission is changed to the restlessness of the rubber worm. In other words, this magic tinder will probably stay in my body for a while. Calm thinking. Let him calm down his restless emotions. As long as the magic tinder did not cause any harm, he would let it live in his heart. In the future, he would slowly figure out how to connect with the magic tinder, or wait for the release of the new Fire Dragon chain mission to solve the problem of the magic tinder. He pulled the rope that hung down, and shouted to the top of the collapsed sinkhole, "Philip, Xavier! My lord, we are here!" The voice of the retainer knight came from the cave entrance. They had been guarding the burial ground. "Pull me up." After returning to the ground and asking, he found out that he did not stay in the crypt for too long. In other words, he was only unconscious for about a quarter of an hour. A quarter of an hour. He was so hungry that his head was dizzy and he even wanted to eat himself. Obviously, it was caused by the magic tinder. Fortunately, it was just hunger, there were no other changes in his body, and the operation of his battle chi was normal. "My lord, how is the situation in the burial ground?" Marcus, who came from the training ground, asked. The 5 iconic bones of the burial ground disappeared, and anyone would be puzzled. Probably the 5 bones have decayed, triggering the collapse of the ground. "There is nothing in the sinkhole," List said casually. "What needs to be done now is to fill up the collapsed sinkhole to prevent the ground from collapsing again and endangering the safety of the people in the territory. There have been 3 deaths and 1 injury, the loss is great." Every serf in the territory was an important productive force. In addition to the force majeure of old age and death of illness, List hoped to minimize the casualties in other aspects. "We can transport the rocks produced by the blizzard beasts and fill this sinkhole," the administrative officer, Blair, suggested. List was here, and so was the training of the blizzard beasts. Every time the training was over, a large number of rocks were released from the rock thorns. List thought about it and said, "The terrain of the burial ground is not high. On the contrary, it is very low. It is actually a bit abnormal that there was no water before. You can fill half of it with rocks and sea sand, and find a way to fill the other half with fresh water. Whether it is farming or grazing in the future, you will need fresh water." He guessed that the reason why there was no water in this sinkhole was probably related to the fire dragon bones. All the water was evaporated. Now that the dragon bones have decayed, maybe they can hold water. Chapter 457. The heavy rain came faster than expected. The climate of the island was like this. It may be cloudless in the morning, but it would be stormy in the afternoon. When the bottom layer of the collapsed sinkhole was barely filled with rocks and sand, a sudden heavy rain poured down. The time was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. At the same time, List was in his room in Port Town, eating heartily. The roasted World of Warcraft meat was sprinkled with seasoning. He did not need alcohol to accompany the meal, and he still ate delicious. This was his 4th meal of the day. 1 in the morning, 1 in the morning, 1 at noon, and 1 in the afternoon. And he had to eat in the evening, and get up in the middle of the night to eat again. 7 meals a day, and each meal was more than before. He also had to go to the toilet twice to expel the residue after the food was digested. So, I am now a man and a dragon sharing a mouth to eat? After eating the barbecue, List took out a glass of dragon milk and drank it. There was a complicated look of sorrow between his eyebrows. Despite eating 7 meals a day, he not only did not show any signs of obesity, but on the contrary, he felt a little thinner. The magical fire seed absorbs nutrients, so I have to afford more World of Warcraft meat, dragon milk, and other nutritious foods. I am afraid the amount of food I spend on eating now is comparable to Dosen. Dosen and other Blizzard beasts were intermediate World of Warcraft, and the food consumed every day was huge. List had caught up and showed signs of surpassing them. Judging from the value of food, the value of his consumption was higher because he could not do without dragon milk and World of Warcraft meat. If he did not eat World of Warcraft meat or drink dragon milk for a meal, he would always feel weak. I don't know how long it will take to raise this magical fire seed. In the long run, I will be eaten by it sooner or later. The only good thing is that the magical fire seed does not consume magic power, otherwise I really can't afford to take potions. He had been eating every day for the past 2 days. However, he did not feel the slightest change in the position of his heart. Other than the occasional warm feeling from the mana spark, there was no other activity. No matter how hard List tried, he could not draw it out, nor could he stimulate it. There was no way to use the magic power of the magic fire seed itself. He guessed that the magic power that made up the magic fire seed was definitely the highly concentrated dragon magic. Otherwise, there was no way to explain where so much fire dragon magic went after being transformed by the dragon bone magic array. Volcanic glass was still being mined in the territory. About a dozen tons of volcanic glass could be mined from the surface. The shallow volcanic glass was very easy to mine, and the soil was very soft. However, it was very difficult to mine volcanic glass in the deeper layers. At this stage, there was a shortage of serfs, so they chose shallow volcanic glass for mining. Based on the area of Black Horse Island, the total reserves of volcanic glass exceed 50 tons. He used about 20 tons of fire dragon magic in the volcanic glass to condense a small magic fire seed. Such a compression ratio can compress gas into liquid. Why is the change in fire dragon magic only condensed into a flame that is not much bigger than a candle flame? It was difficult to guess the transformation of magic power. List didn't know how much resources it took to raise a dragon, but raising a magic fire seed had already accelerated the degree of his financial constraints. I have to speed up the practice of aura decay. Currently, using this chi secret skill can slow down the loss of chi by 1/3 of the body. According to Stephanie Vulture's introduction of the chi secret skill, at the elite Earth Knight level, it can slow down the loss of chi by 3/4. Slowing down the loss of chi meant improving the utilization of nutrients and reducing food intake. By mastering the aura decay, the 3/4 reduction would allow him to save at least 2 meals. Eating only 5 meals a day would be enough. Moreover, after mastering the aura decay, the consumption of potions would also be reduced. It was undoubtedly a very cost-effective chi secret skill. I must master it as soon as possible. Just after eating, he entered a state of cultivation and worked hard to run the chi method of the aura decay. With the pressure given by the magic fire seed, he was extremely focused on his cultivation, concentrating on every detail of the chi secret skill. He hoped to master it as soon as possible and save some money on meals. Suddenly, his heart jumped, and he felt the rubber sprite worm connected to his mind, giving him a vague feeling of restlessness. He raised his eyebrows and called out the smoke mission. Mission completed. Reward: the restlessness of the rubber worm. The mission was completed, indicating that the collapsed sinkhole had been filled in the heavy rain, becoming a lake and 5 holes. With the water to support the pressure on the surface, the rocks around the sinkhole should not collapse easily. But in the future, fences should be set around to prevent falling into the water. It was a sinkhole lake nearly 30 meters deep. He stood up and prepared to take the rubber worm to plant a new cordyceps. Needless to say, he could already sense what the restless rubber worm wanted to do. Just like the previous rubber worm, it wanted to spit out the new cordyceps that it had bred in its body. By the way, pay attention to the new smoke mission. The new autumn harvest is about to begin. Flower Town and Black Horse Island have opened up many farmlands. However, the food cultivated is still difficult to meet the population consumption of the territory, and there will be more people in the future. Please store enough food for 10,000 people through the winter. Reward, a sprite. Huh! Seeing the reward, List was stunned. Another sprite? The surprise came too suddenly, and he didn't know how to express his feelings for a while. He felt a little stiff. It was probably because of the fire dragon in the past 2 days that his brain was a little jumbled. It took a while for his mind to work again. Is it a wild sprite like Nami, or a domestic sprite worm like Ella? If it was a domestic sprite worm, which one would it be, the corngrass sprite worm, or the rubber worm triplet? It should not be the rubber worm triplet. They should have evolved into 3 sprites. So, his thoughts shifted to the corngrass worm. He did not bring this sprite worm with him. It was still in the castle of Flower Town. List was not sure whether it was quietly accumulating power or not. He was not even sure that the corngrass worm was going to break through into a sprite. However, during this time, apart from the rubber worm triplets, the corngrass worm was the only other sprite worm. List shook his head. He suppressed the meaningless speculation. He turned to think about the content of the mission. Store enough food for 10,000 people to survive the winter. According to tradition, winter is from November to February of the next year. However, in Flower Town, the so-called winter refers to the snowy season from mid-December to mid-February of the next year. Flower Town was the northeasternmost corner of Coral Island, and Black Horse Island was northeast of Flower Town. Starting in mid-December every year, there would be a long season of snow and ice. During this time, serfs would usually stay at home and move as little as possible to reduce calorie consumption and the number of meals. Food for more than 10,000 people for 2 months is not a small amount. Grains alone are certainly not enough. Seafood and meat must be stocked up in large quantities, preferably with a large number of salted meat and pickled vegetables. But the smoke mission requires food for 10,000 people to survive the winter is very interesting. The smoke mission was closely related to his own thoughts. Sometimes List thought that many of the missions were driven by his own imagination. For example, the strange mission to help Meopal and Angela improve their sexual relations. Perhaps List always deliberately thought of Angela Sapphire's debauchery, which was projected through the smoke mission. Recently, he had been worried about how to buy serfs and transport them back to the territory. Therefore, the smoke mission issued the mission of food for 10,000 people to survive the winter. Perhaps I can try it in the future smoke missions and actively guide the smoke mission through constant self-suggestion? It feels a bit unreliable. At most, it will affect the content of the mission, but it does not seem to affect the reward of the mission. But it is not a bad thing to try. He had always relied on the reward of the smoke mission to achieve the rapid development of the territory and himself. But deep in his heart, he also had a strong desire for control. He wanted to firmly grasp the smoke mission in his hands, rather than passively trigger the mission. Moreover, it may be related to a sacred dragon. Smoke dragon. Therefore, he never stopped thinking about the smoke mission. Chapter 458. Spit it out, little fellow. Holding an anxious rubber worm in his palm, List treaded on the muddy water and came to a vacant rubber park that had long been planned. In the future, more than 10,000 mu of land would be cultivated in the rubber park, so the distribution of the park had been determined in advance. The rubber worm opened its mouth and a faint green light flew out. It was a small seed. After falling to the ground, it immediately took root and germinated. Then, at a speed visible to the naked eye, it grew branches and leaves, gradually growing into a huge worm-stalk tree. Such a dynamic plant growth scene moved Liszt. Seeds can grow into towering trees, sprite worms are bred in such a way. Then, what about the magic power fire seed in my body? Is there any connection between it and the sprite worm-stalk seed? Sprites could be seen as being bred from seed. If his guess was not wrong, then a fire dragon could also be bred from a magic power fire seed. Then, sprites and dragons were bred from seeds, and their seeds were obviously not ordinary seeds, but were condensed from magic power. The sprite wormstalk seed also had the function of ordinary plant seed. It was probably impossible for a magic power fire seed to germinate in the ground. I hope it will not germinate in my heart. Use me as a soil to absorb nutrients, suck up my chi, and give birth to a fire dragon. As the new rubber worm stalk grew, his thoughts became active. One moment, he compared the similarities and differences between sprite seeds and magic power fire seeds. The next moment, he thought that humans developed from fertilized eggs, which could also be regarded as seeds. The next moment, he concluded that probably all life originated from seeds. And then, he inexplicably thought that the siren Chi did not seem to develop from seeds. When she was born, she was in a shell. Except for her legs below the knees, the rest of her body had already fully developed. Perhaps a chi was originally a shell? Sprite worms did not exist, but ordinary plants suddenly mutated and gave birth to sprite worms. Sirens might not exist, but shells suddenly mutated and gave birth to a siren. Such a thought was a bit weird. He did not think that a chi was transformed from a shell. The flesh inside a shell had no beauty to speak of. But how was a chi shell formed, and where was she born? If I can solve this mystery, maybe I can breed new sirens in batches. Although a chi was still underage and was still being groomed, her role was obviously huge. She was the one who discovered Nami, the kelp worm, the ringed reef, the pearl lake, and the black giant clam. She was also the one who discovered the pink conch. She was the one who rescued Christruth, the green caterpillar, the mallard duck, and the six-headed sea serpent king were all discovered by her. Basically, smoke mission rewards related to the sea were inseparable from a chi. After all, Liszt was not an aquatic creature. A knight could conquer the earth, and even the sky in the future. However, not even a dragon knight could conquer the sea, except for a dragon knight who rode on a water dragon. A water dragon would definitely be able to roam freely in the sea. He did not wander in the sea of thoughts for long. The worm stalk had already been settled. Liszt put away the rubber worm that had calmed down and began to size up the new rubber tree worm stalk. He discovered that this cordyceps was completely different from the previous two cordyceps. It was much larger, its trunk thicker, and it had more branches. Especially its leaves, which were extremely exaggerated, larger than a banana leaf. It bore no fruit. It was probably like an ordinary rubber tree, where rubber could be cut from the trunk. The biggest mutation of this new worm stalk is probably its leaves. I'll pluck a leaf to study first. Liszt carefully pulled off a leaf with magic power. The magic power quickly dissipated, and it became an ordinary leaf. From the fracture at the root of the leaf, he could see a small amount of rubber oozing out, which proved that the new rubber tree could still produce rubber. It did not lose this ability. In Liszt's view, the value of rubber was comparable to magic potions. If the ability to produce rubber was lost, it would definitely be a failed mutation. Such a big leaf, and it's quite strong. He pulled the leaf, but it was not torn. It can be made into a fan or a bag, like a rice dumpling, using its leaves to wrap food? I always feel that this kind of function does not match the value of a rubber tree. The new rubber tree worm stalk was settled. List's next focus was to complete the new smoke mission, to stock up enough food for 10,000 people to survive the winter. But he soon discovered a serious problem. It is not October yet, and the winter is from mid-December to mid-February. When do I stock up enough food to complete the mission? Should I start stocking up now? He was not sure if the food he stockpiled now could be regarded as food for the winter. However, it had to be done first. There was no way to stock up enough food in a hurry. Ensuring basic food and clothing, a robust young man would consume about 600 caddies of food a year. Subtracting the surplus consumed by the old, weak, women, and children, and counting the excess consumed by the night, one could get an estimate. A single subject would need to consume 2 caddies of food a day. 10,000 people would need 20,000 caddies of food a day, which was 10 tons. 10,000 people would need 600 tons of food for 2 months. From now on, I have to find a way to buy grains from all over the Coral Island every day. By December, I will be able to store about 100 tons. Besides the consumption of food produced by the territory, I will also be able to store about 100 tons. Adding meat and seafood to the mix, storing another 100 tons won't be a problem. There is still a shortfall of 300 tons. These 300 tons had to be purchased from the outer islands. The cost was definitely not low. Currently, the income from the flower wine has been mortgaged until next year. The income from the black tulip, flower soap, and rubber is barely enough to maintain the territory's construction. To buy more food, he had to raise gold coins again. If there's no other way, I'll start selling black pearls. Let's see if there's a market for black pearls below the size of a bowl. He had sold a fist-size black pearl to Levis for hundreds of gold coins. Now with more and more black pearls, the price will certainly fall. Of course, no matter how much it falls, it is definitely more valuable than the white pearls produced by the Grand Duke's pearl oysters in the Lake of Tranquility. White pearls can only calm the mind. Black pearls can not only calm the mind but also dispel the wind, attribute magic. And they are also bigger and have more magic. 10 times the price. I can definitely sell them. Now the large black giant clams in the Pearl Lake can no longer be found, but there are still a lot of small black giant clams. I can earn gold coins by catching a batch of them. I don't need to worry about the territory's finances at all. I have no money, but I have specialty products. Therefore, after returning to Flower Town, he immediately took a few black pearl samples and went to Tulip Castle to discuss the black pearl trade with the Levis couple. If there is no market on the Coral Island, he can let his sister-in-law Rolia sell them on the Golden Island. Chapter 459. Black pearls can be mass-produced. You mean to say that they can produce white pearls like the Sapphire family's pearl oysters? Levis was surprised. Rolia, who was sitting next to him, was playing with a few black pearls that were smaller than ping-pong balls that List had taken out. Levis, the black pearl pendant you gave me was made of this kind of black pearl, right? And that huge black pearl, is it the same kind? Levis nodded. That's right, Rolia. List faintly smiled. My wedding gift to you is the black pearl that can disperse the wind attribute magic within a range of 200 to 300 meters. It's the same kind as the gift Levis gave you. These black pearls are produced by the sea monster black giant clam. Levis couldn't help but complain, but when you sold me the black pearls, you said that they can't be mass-produced. They are rare items. At that time, they were indeed rare items. However, after continuously exploring the ocean, I finally found a place where black giant clams live. Therefore, the black pearls became a specialty of my territory. Now that you are selling the black pearls to me, you won't be selling them at the original price, right? Brother, the 2 black pearls were expensive. Indeed, there is a principle that the rarer something is, the more precious it is. But you can't deny that their value is very high. Moreover, even if the black giant clams became a specialty of my territory, the production is still very limited. They are still a rare item. How much are you going to sell them? I actually don't intend to sell them to you. Of course, if you are willing to buy them, as long as the price is right, I can give you an appropriate discount. Liszt casually solicited business and continued, Actually, I intend to sell the black pearls to Rolia. I don't know if you are interested? Selling? Rolia's eyes lit up. Although aristocrats despise merchants, they are not ashamed to do business. Yes, according to the different specifications of the black pearls, I can set a different price. I can give you a certain amount of commission, Rolia. For example, I can set the price of the black pearl in your hand at 50 gold coins. You can take it to Golden Island and sell it. I will give you a 10% commission, which is 5 gold coins. Rolia was moved. But she looked at Levis. Levis rubbed his chin. Black pearls are indeed good, more valuable than white pearls. I can do this business. But 10 points is too little, at least 20 points. 20 points? Why don't you just rob a bank? Liszt cried out in alarm. Brother, sister-in-law, black pearls are pearls produced by the sea monster black giant clam. I have to pay a huge price to hunt them, and I even have to pay with the lives of fishermen. They look like black pearls, but they are actually blood-stained pearls. When it came to making up stories, Liszt was never afraid. He tried his best to describe the difficulty of harvesting the black giant clam. He described himself as being so poor that he had to risk his life and death battle with sea monsters to fish out black pearls in exchange for some gold coins. Perhaps it was because his performance was too exaggerated that Levis was unmoved. Black pearls are obviously not expensive items that small nobles can consume. To sell them to the greater nobles, they need channels. Liszt, if you want us to come up with channels to do business, you can't be less than 20 points. Liszt also had a toothache. It seemed that if he didn't bleed a little, he wouldn't be able to talk business. However, he quickly thought of a new way to stop losses. The price I set for the size and specifications of the black pearls is fixed, and the commission is fixed at 10%. But, if you can sell them for a higher price, then the higher part of the price will be your profit. Really? Of course. Good. Levis and Rolia looked at each other and immediately decided. How many black pearls do you have? We will take them all. Although this business is troublesome and requires Rolia to use a lot of her connections, but we should be able to earn a lot of hard work in a short period of time to make up for the consumption of my marriage. I don't have many black pearls, so each one needs to be carefully checked for a satisfactory price. Then you have to pay me a sum of gold coins in advance as a deposit. I am seriously short of money for the construction of my territory. There isn't much liquid capital in the castle. I can probably move around 3,000 gold coins and below if I scrape together. Levis said. Rolia suddenly interjected. Levis, I still have some private dowries. I can probably raise about 5,000 gold coins. 3,000 plus 5,000, a total of 8,000 gold coins. Okay, the deposit is enough. The largest black pearls that Liszt provided for sale were only slightly bigger than a big bowl. The others were all small black pearls. The large black pearls that could be used to make the wind-calming divine pearl were all kept for future use. Levis and his wife were very bold. They believed that the black pearls could definitely be sold at a high price, so they bought all the black pearls in Liszt's hands. The price of this batch of black pearls ranged from the highest 1,500 gold coins to the smallest 50 gold coins, which was a total of 24,550 gold coins. 8,000 gold coins were paid as a deposit first, and the subsequent 17,550 gold coins would be paid after the black pearls were sold out. It's a pleasure to cooperate with you, Liszt. It's a pleasure to cooperate with you, Levis, Rolia. After the inventory work was completed, the three were very satisfied. Liszt was satisfied that he finally had enough money on hand and did not need to borrow money. As for how much the Levis and his wife could earn from this batch of black pearls, that was the other party's ability. He sold it at the price he wanted, and how much others could earn through channels had nothing to do with him, let alone jealousy or regret. In this regard, his mentality was very good. After all, black pearls were not a one-time business. At worst, the next batch would be saved and the price would be raised. The siren He often went to Pearl Lake to collect some black pearls. She was very skilled in magic, and could take advantage of some black giant clams opening their shells to directly dig out the black pearls. She didn't even need to kill, basically achieving sustainable development and a steady stream of black pearls. Of course, what could be collected now were small black pearls, and large black giant clams did not live in Pearl Lake. List used the smallest black pearls to string a black pearl necklace and gave it to his sister Elvira as a gift in advance. At the same time, he also paid off the 800 gold coins he owed to Elvira and the 2,000 gold coins he owed to Madame Penelope. He didn't like the feeling of owing money to others. Most of the rest of the money was invested in purchasing food and production materials. With the help of the Tulip family's caravan and the Beer Islands caravan, a large number of wheat, barley, corn, beans and other grains were purchased from the outer islands and stored in the warehouse on Black Horse Island. Time passed. Chapter 460. This chapter is Dream of Ancient Jiangnan. Tulip Castle. The meeting was solemnly held. A huge thick bast map was spread on the wall. Black ink lines outlined a simple map of the sea. This map was very interesting. The upper left corner and lower right corner were the central axes. The left side was yellow-brown, representing the continent, while the right side was a light blue, representing the sea. On the sea, there were islands, which represented the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. The one closest to the central axis of the map was the Iron Hoof Island. The upper right corner and lower left corner were the central axes, and the continent was divided into two by a red line. The upper half of the continent was the territory of the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom, while the lower half was the territory of the Eagle Kingdom. Along this central axis, the Iron Hoof Island was also divided into two. In other words, the distance between the Iron Hoof Island and the two kingdoms was the same. Both were 6 days' voyages. Of course, it would take 6.5 days to reach the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom, which deviated slightly from the central axis. It could be estimated that the distance between the Iron Hoof Island and the coastline of the Eagle Kingdom was about 1,200 kilometers, which was equivalent to the distance between Beijing and Shanghai. It was about the width of 9 Taiwan Straits. In previous years, when we attacked the hinterland of the Eagle Kingdom, we mainly concentrated on the 4 coastlines of Sardine Bay, Yellow Mud Coast, Roaring Estuary, and Lush Promenade. This year, we will cooperate with the Orders of Chivalry of the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom to attack the area of Sardine Bay. It is surrounded by the 4 major cities of Snaketooth City, Ambition City, Cold Flow City, and Dragonfall City. Captain Mickey stood in front of the map and explained, "These 4 major cities belong to the territories of the 4 marquises. Our Orders of Chivalry cannot conquer these major cities and castles, but the vast flat land around them is a grassland for horses to gallop. We can take all the resources that can be taken." "Which area will our Coral Island focus on?" asked Viscount Jonas. "We focus on the area around Snaketooth City. This area is poorly developed and has been robbed many times in the past. It is difficult for the nobles of the Eagle Kingdom to develop their territories, so the resources are relatively sparse. However, the major guilds will compensate them for their military exploit." The Count sat in his seat and explained. The Grand Duchy of Sapphire attacked the coastline of the Kingdom of Eagle every year. However, the direction of attack was different every year. Sometimes they would attack from Sardinia Bay, sometimes from the mouth of the Roaring River, and sometimes they would even land on some nameless coastline. As a feudal country, the defense of these territories was naturally left to the local lords. Without a unified military operation, it was easy for the Grand Duchy of Sapphire to loot them. The lords of the coastal area were the poorest nobles of the Eagle Kingdom. However, due to years of war, every territory had powerful orders of chivalry, so it wasn't easy to conquer them. Their territories were much larger, and most of them were in the form of enclave. In other words, these lords also had territories inland, so the development around the coastline was relatively backward. It had been many years since Sardinia Bay had raided them. This time, the Grand Duchy of Sapphire would start from Sardinia Bay. The orders of chivalry of Coral Island would mainly attack the vicinity of Snaketooth City. As for how to attack, it would need to be discussed after reaching the continent. War was not a movie, there was no rehearsal here. Half good news and half bad news. Do you want to hear the good news or the bad news first? The Count smiled. Without waiting for his followers to respond, he said, "Well, in fact, the two pieces of news are connected. Coxcomb City will gather a group of orders of chivalry to accompany us to attack the hinterland of the Kingdom of Eagle." Coxcomb City was a large city of the Steel Ridge Kingdom, and the fief of a marquis. With the addition of such a fresh force, the battle situation of attacking the hinterland would be more certain. However, the addition of a marquis meant that there would be more people to share military exploits and resources. Sure enough, half good news and half bad news. List didn't care. He looked at the map and began to imagine how he would plunder resources. Unlike the previous orders of chivalry, he wasn't strong when it came to charging, but the speed at which he dismantled the castle was absolutely fast. In the past, the expansion orders were mainly focused on raid. They rarely besieged cities and only fought for minerals. However, with the help of the Blizzard Beast, the benefits of dismantling the castle were far greater than raiding the mines. Moreover, his task had been assigned to lead a Coral Island orders of chivalry to cooperate with the Count to focus on attacking the large and small castles around Snaketooth City. The Count also knew how to maximize the benefit. With Dosen and the 8 little ones, this group of intermediate World of Warcraft forces, it would be stupid not to know how to make use of them. After the meeting, the followers left Tulip Castle, returned to their respective territories, reorganized their armaments, and waited for their departure on October 6. Oxhorn City, the big city of Iron Hoof Island, was still the starting point of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire's expedition to carry out the expansion orders and the orders of chivalry. In Flower Town, List spent the whole day explaining all the construction procedures of the territory. He spent the rest of the night communicating with Butler Carter about the various tasks in the castle and bringing along enough food. The next day, he told Chris Truth to take over his deal with Elksun. Then he said goodbye to Achi and told her to remember to supervise the construction of the mangrove forest, collect black giant clam pearls, search for sea sprite worms, and raise little mallard duck. "Brother, how long will it take for you to come back from this war?" Achi was very reluctant to let List leave. She used to live alone in the sea. But now she liked the time when there was company. "It will take more than a month at least, 2 or 3 months at most, but I think I will be back before the new year." The little siren squeezed her fist. "Well, Achi will practice magic seriously and help my brother with his work. Every day, I will come to the Seascape Villa to rest for a while and wait for my brother to come back. When my brother comes back, Achi will definitely become stronger. No sea monster in the sea can beat Achi." "I believe that." List hugged Achi. Her magic talent was beyond doubt. Early morning of October 8th. List had already dressed up and led the Black Horse Island Night Squad, ready to set off from Flower Town. He gave one last instruction to Gort, who came to see him off. "Advisor Gort, the construction of the territory will be shared by Isaiah and Blair, but you have to take command from a high level of overall planning. Pay particular attention to food hoarding and don't be stingy with the expenditure of gold coins. I will send a large number of serfs, at least tens of thousands of people. They must not be short of food for the winter. Please rest assured, I will always remember. The management and arrangement of the new serfs should also be planned in advance. If you encounter any problems, you can go directly to Tulip Castle for Sir Levis. I understand, my lord. So. Chapter 461. The night had gone far away. The flower town was restored to its former tranquility at dawn. However, the small town's administrative office was bustling with activity. The port town's and flower town's officials, as well as the garrison knights, were all gathered here. The meeting was presided over by Consultant Gort. Isaiah, Blair, you first talk about the financial situation of the two towns, and then we will reasonably arrange the gold coin subsidies for the Lord's support. Isaiah first said, the income of Flower Town is roughly as follows. The expenditure of Flower Town is roughly as follows. In general, the town's water flow is very high, but to bear the consumption of the castle and Black Horse Island, the loss is about 5 gold coins a day, and at least 150 gold coins a month is needed. The construction of Flower Town has been slightly stagnant, and most industries are making money. Unfortunately, the main projects are either mortgaged or have limited production capacity, and cannot be used as a cash cow. Coupled with the daily consumption of the castle and the construction materials to support Black Horse Island, it is really difficult to operate. Blair went on to say, the main income of Port Town at present depends only on the rubber produced by the rubber trees and the pottery and charcoal of the brick factory. The Port Town's expenditure needs to support the overall construction of Black Horse Island. The projects lack people, materials, and money. The loss is at least 15 gold coins a day. Rubber production is not high, and the brick factory has to meet the needs of the territory. Black Horse Island is also built in parallel with various industries. It is already very healthy to maintain a loss of only 15 gold coins a day. The two administrative officers each reported the situation of the territory. Gort cleared his throat and said, the Lord has allocated a total of 2,300 gold coins to the territory finance. I plan to take out a total of 500 gold coins to store food. According to the Lord, to store enough food for 10,000 new serfs, plus the existing people in the territory, we need to meet the food needs of 15,000 people. Advisor, we are constantly hoarding food, and the price of food is bound to rise sharply. I think we are lucky to be able to hoard enough food for 1,000 gold coins. Blair refuted Gort's idea from another perspective. Isaiah also supported this point. I talked to Captain Harpagon of the Flower Caravan. It is really getting more and more difficult to purchase food. We can't expect the foreign lords to sell food to us at the same price as the Lord of Coral Island. Refuted by the two administrative officers. Gort was in a bad mood, but he still nodded. Then let's use 1,000 gold coins as a budget to store food. That's the end of this topic. Let's move on to the next topic, the allocation of funds to various industries. The town's administrative office was having a meeting. There was also a small meeting in the castle. In addition to Butler Carter, Mrs. Morrison, and Mrs. Abbey, there was also Chris Truth, Harpagon, Charlotte, and other caravan captains. Carter was the first to speak. Madam Chris is very busy, so let's start with the purchase of magic books. The master has allocated 1,000 gold coins for books, 400 of which will be used to buy night novels and 600 of which will be used to buy magic books. The main transaction with Mr. Elkson needs Chris to preside over it. Chrissy's temperament was out of place with the servants. She just sat aside and said lightly, Mr. Carter, the Viscount told me that when Lord Elkson comes to the town to trade, you can inform me, and I will complete the price of each magic book. That's for the best. Then, if there's nothing else, I'll take my leave first. On the way back, she was in a trance. Her thoughts were a little chaotic. I feel that I seem to have touched a cognitive barrier recently. According to the theory of three-state magic array and reality interaction, This is a sign of transition from a static magic array to a dynamic magic array. Unfortunately, my accumulation is still weak, and I need more magic reference. She thought of what Lys said to her yesterday when he came to pick up the potion. Chris, I don't have the money to build a mage tower for you yet, but you can buy any magic books you want. In addition, I will ask Elksun to find sufficient casting methods for your reference. I hope you can become a great mage as soon as possible. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but breathe a little heavily. The value of a mage is too low. I can't let Lys down. Only by becoming a great mage can I repay him for saving my life and for his usual smile. I have dedicated all my body and mind to the truth. Lys's voice and smile flashed through her mind. She gradually showed an expression of longing, and her eyes were full of warmth. But I still want to see him smile every day. On the sea, a huge white shell opened. Achi held a small horn in her hands and blew it softly. She looked a little sad. The mangrove sprite, Nami, was holding a peanut nougat and gnawing on it. At Nami's feet, the dark green kelp worm swam in circles around it, the gills on the back of its neck opening and closing, looking very cheerful. The kelp worm's abdomen had feet that looked like lumps of flesh. They were flatter, which allowed it to swim quickly. Soon, Achi put away the small horn, touched Nami, touched the kelp worm, and took a deep breath. Let's go, Nami, kelp worm, let's go catch more sprite worms. When brother comes back, we will give him a big surprise. Of course, Lys didn't know that the little siren was preparing a surprise for him. He had arrived at the Coral City port. After checking his orders of chivalry members, he boarded the flagship of the Coral Island fleet, the Tulip. When all the knight, retainer knight, and supplies had boarded their respective ships, the majestic fleet immediately set off for the Azure Waves Sea, once again advancing towards the Iron Hoof Island. Lys was busy locking up Dosen and the 8 small ones in the cabin to prevent them from running around. The chocobo Loki was also locked up in the cabin. With wheat and soybeans, it enjoyed staying in the cabin. Soon after, as usual, all the aristocrats came to the Tulip for a meeting presided over by the Count. The topic of the meeting was the distribution of spoils of war. The basic principle of meritorious service was distribution according to work. The more work, the more you get, the less you get, the less you get. The basic principle of supplies was that whoever seized them owned them, but 1/3 of them had to be used as compensation for the deceased in the orders of chivalry. At the same time, it was also stipulated that the seized mineral resources were prohibited from being sold to mercenary groups. They had to be turned over to the treasury and distributed by the Grand Duke. The main purpose of the annual development orders was to seize minerals. After clarifying the distribution of the spoils of war, the aristocrats dispersed and returned to their ships. Lys suddenly thought of a question and asked the Count, "Father, are those mercenary groups trustworthy? Based on my many years of battle experience, it doesn't matter whether they are trustworthy or not. As long as they can help us with trade, some losses can be borne. If I were the Lord of the Eagle Kingdom, I would never allow mercenary groups to develop." Chapter 462. In terms of social status, mercenaries belonged to the middle and middle class, similar to those master craftsmen who mastered irreplaceable skills. They were second only to the upper nobles, the middle and upper magicians, the non-titled knight officials, and the indispensable artists of the upper class. They surpassed the middle and lower class servants, craftsmen, workers, merchants, rats, and the serfs at the bottom of society. Most of these mercenaries were poor knights. There were no mercenary groups in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, so there were no mercenaries. But in the countries on the continent, mercenary groups were a widespread and common phenomenon, often established in the name of guard trade, World of Warcraft hunting, capturing elves, and so on. But secretly, mercenary groups were the most direct participants in the slave trade movement, often playing the role of robbers and robbers. List did not know how mercenary groups originated and how they developed to this extent. But after talking with the Earl, he gradually understood the mercenary group. The mercenary group was actually the same as the rats, an extension of the power of the nobles. If the rats played the role of an intelligence organization, then the role of the mercenary group was more like a dynamic social organization. One of the disadvantages of the feudal system was that there was no governing relationship between the territories, and on the contrary, there was great competition. Many lords even had various personal grudges, so it was not good to directly send orders of chivalry to plunder each other, so mercenary groups could play a good role. And mercenary groups were also a huge source of profit. There was no shortage of people on the continent. Every time there was a war, the slave trade was a profitable business. Even many local lords looked forward to the Grand Duchy of Sapphire to plunder, as long as they did not plunder their own territories. At this time, they would frantically cooperate with the invading orders of chivalry to trade with the serfs that could be caught anywhere in exchange for the materials that the invading orders of chivalry looted from other places. Every time there was a war between the Eagle Kingdom and the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom, the mercenary groups were the most active. These mercenary groups did not dare to invade the castle of the territory, but they could come and go like the wind by plundering the serfs. It can be said that when we invade the area of Sardinia Bay, except for the lords in this area who will resist, the lords and mercenary groups in the surrounding areas will only wave their cutlery and share the wealth of the Sardinia Bay area with us, the Count said with fervor and assurance. This is also the reason why we dare to attack the Eagle Kingdom every year. He looked at List, who was listening attentively. He finally found the feeling of a father teaching his son. He continued, also, for some suzerains in Sardinia Bay, we can even sit down and discuss business at night while we fight during the day. List was puzzled. Why? The Count asked, how do you think the nobles rule their territories, or what do we rely on to live? Living a life thousands of times better than that of ordinary people? Nobles rule over their territories by relying on their cultivation of qi. Where does do qi cultivation come from? From the land. That's right. You're very smart. You can see the essence of the problem clearly. The Count praised and then said, the aristocracy relies on the land, and all resources are obtained from the land. You either get it from your own land or from someone else's land, or rely on the serfs to farm, or rely on the knight to plunder. What does this have to do with the suzerains of Sardinia Bay, and us fighting wars and trading at the same time? Since war is inevitable, some suzerains will certainly look for opportunities to reduce losses. The greater suzerains can transfer their losses to the lesser suzerains through trading with us, and the lesser suzerains can transfer their losses to the civilians, or to other suzerains. It's undeniable that they have lost the noble qualities of a knight. Did a knight have noble qualities? List was at a loss. After talking with the Count and understanding the background of the mercenary corps, he vaguely felt the similarities in history. Although this world was completely different from Earth, and the country he was in had nothing to do with Earth. But observing the essence, the relationship between the Grand Duchy of Sapphire and the Kingdom of Eagle, wasn't it a different world's version of the Wokou Rebellion of the Ming Dynasty? During the Ming Dynasty, the Wokou originated from Japan and often attacked the coastal areas in the southeast of China. However, in the middle and late stages of the Wokou Rebellion, there were very few real Wokou pirates. According to historical records, only 3 out of 10 real Wokou pirates were real, and the rest were fake Wokou pirates, who were rebels of the Ming Dynasty. After all, the Japanese Ronin, who formed the early Wokou pirates, were unfamiliar with the southeast coast and could not form a fighting force at all. Only by colluding with the local people could they go ashore and plunder. In the Ming Dynasty's professional anti-Japanese book, the leaders of the 14 groups of Wokou pirates were all from the Ming Dynasty. The root cause was the Ming Dynasty's implementation of the sea ban, so that coastal residents could not rely on the sea to survive, and could only become bandits. In addition, for the sake of profit, when the sea ban was relaxed, they were sea merchants, and when the sea ban was strict, they were pirates. Even the aristocratic families secretly colluded with each other, thus causing the Woku Rebellion for hundreds of years. This world was full of magic. The Grand Duchy of Sapphire's pioneering order was similar to the Woku Rebellion. Although we can rob a lot of resources from the Kingdom of Eagle, the real wealth created on the land is also robbed by the suzerains of the Kingdom of Eagle. We probably just rob some mines by some serfs, and the rest of the resources are all transferred by the local nobles. In the final analysis, there was a saying in the Yuan song, "Prosperity, the people suffer. Death, the people suffer." After the pioneering order was issued, the ones who were really robbed were the hard-working civilians and serfs. Liszt even thought, is the annual war between the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom and the Kingdom of Eagle a bit like the 100 Years' War between England and France on Earth? In the Middle Ages, England and France had a war that lasted for more than 100 years. The nobles launched the Knights' War for profit. In the end, it was naturally the civilians who suffered. As he thought about the war, Liszt suddenly felt dispirited, even though his soul came from Earth and had nothing to do with this world. But soon he cheered up. I don't do anything, but the civilians are still being oppressed by the nobles. If I work hard and succeed in riding a dragon in the future, I may be able to bring a new structure to this world. He clenched his fists. His eyes became more determined. As long as I have justice in my heart and can bring a better life to the civilians in the future, then my participation in the war is an act of justice. This self-analysis, of course, whitewashed the act of waging war for profit, but it was also a portrayal of his heart. The living standards of the civilians under the rule of the territory were definitely far higher than that of the civilians in other territories. His goal was to ride a dragon and explore this wonderful world. He did not intend to be a saint, but he also would not become a mercenary cold-blooded nobleman. While fighting for the great cause of riding a dragon, he would also bring beauty to the world. Why not? The faith in his heart was wiped clean. He regained his usual indifference, standing at the bow of the ship, holding a glass of juice, admiring the blue sky, white clouds, and rippling blue waves. 4 days passed in a flash, and the fleet had successfully arrived at the Iron Hoof Island, Oxfoot City. They would make the last supplies here. Chapter 463. Iron Hoof Island, Cowhoof City. It was now taken over by the Sapphire family, but the scars of war had not been wiped out. The walls of the huge castle towering by the sea were filled with cracks. It was left behind by the Crown Prince when he led the Orders of Chivalry to capture Cowhoof City. At this moment, the port of Cowhoof City was densely anchored with all kinds of sailboats hanging all kinds of flags. The red tulip flag of the Tulip family was very inconspicuous. While anchored for supplies, Liszt found the Red Crab Island fleet, led by his uncle, Messiro Longtaro. "Uncle, I want to rent the fleet of Red Crab Island to transport a group of serfs for me," Liszt said directly. Messiro liked Liszt, his nephew who had the good looks of the Taro family. "No problem, as long as you pay the corresponding remuneration, the fleet of Red Crab Island can be rented at any time. How many serfs are you going to transport to your territory?" "I am going to transport at least 10,000, and if I can buy more serfs, I hope to gather 20,000. Black Horse Island is just an undeveloped, deserted island. Are you sure you can rely on your territory to support so many serfs? Once there is a shortage of food, it is likely to cause a commotion in the territory, and the serfs will starve to death. I've already stored enough food for 10,000 people to survive the winter. Adding another 10,000 people will only make the territory's food shortage a bit more. I believe that we can obtain food from other sources and safely last until next year's harvest," Liszt replied confidently. Rely on the mountain to eat the mountain, rely on the sea to eat the sea. If the serfs have nothing to eat, then let them go to the seaside to fish for seafood, and then buy seafood from various coastal towns on Coral Island. It was absolutely no problem for them to fill their stomachs. It was nothing more than spending gold coins. You are prepared to deal with it, that's all. Messiro's eyes flashed with a trace of nostalgia, and he said gently, "If Melissa was still alive and saw your performance today, she would have a bright smile every day." For Liszt, Melissa was just a symbol. His predecessor had already passed away when he was very young, so he didn't even have any memories of her. There was nothing to talk about, so he changed the topic. "How is grandfather's health? With the marriage of Meopel and Angela, the Longtaro castle will certainly be filled with more warmth. Don't worry about the mundane affairs. Your grandfather is getting healthier and healthier. It's just that he's been in a bad mood lately." He would not be satisfied until Meopel and Angela brought him the next successor of the Taro family. Even the princess has to work hard for the continuation of the Taro family bloodline. Yes, the inheritance of the family is the most important issue. As Liszt spoke, he suddenly recalled the smoke mission. Meopel and Angela's affair was not harmonious. At that time, the first thing he thought of was borrowing the seed, which was against human ethics, so he immediately changed the mission. But when he went back and thought about it carefully, he felt that he might have been thinking too much. He had been looking down on Angela, who was promiscuous. The smoke mission said that it was because of sexual intercourse, which led to the inability to continue the bloodline of the family. There were a few other possibilities. It was possible that there was a problem with Meopel's sexual ability, which led to the inability to impregnate Angela. It was also possible that there was a problem with Angela's fertility, which led to the inability to get pregnant. There was also a possibility that the sperm was not active and could not swim to the place where it should go, which naturally made it very difficult to get pregnant. The first two possibilities could not be solved, while the latter possibility needed to be adjusted. If it was just an ordinary degree of inactivity, then eating more zinc-rich foods, having a proper routine, and relaxing mood could increase the degree of activity. Oysters were the food with the highest zinc content. Animal livers were also rich in zinc. If Meopel and Angela are unable to conceive, then I really should help them. At least, I can provide them with oyster food. Liszt thought to himself. After anchored in Oxhoof City for one night, the fleet continued its journey. On the azure blue sea, sailboats lined up one after another. Liszt deliberately climbed to the sentry tower at the top of the mainmast, took out his binoculars, and surveyed the surrounding fleet. The binoculars in his hands were second-generation products, and their precision and clarity far exceeded that of the first-generation binoculars. This stemmed from the Count's continuous investment. The Count was very fond of binoculars. After Liszt explained the principles of the binoculars, the Count vigorously pushed the crystal craftsman to research and polish them. At this time, through the binoculars, Liszt captured a whale leaping high from the sea on the right side of the fleet before heavily falling back into the sea, creating a large splash. These giant beasts were a part of the scenery during the voyage, and they would often accompany the fleet for a period of time. As long as the ships did not attack them, they would also not attack the ships, living in harmony. Liszt had even heard crew members say that when the ship was attacked by sea monsters, these giant whales would even lend a hand and drive away the sea monsters. Their huge bodies made it impossible for ordinary low-level sea monsters to deal with them. This may be the behavior of the whales to protect their young. Sea monsters will hunt the young whales, so the big whales will try their best to stop any hunting behavior of the sea monsters, not letting them develop peacefully to reduce the possibility of the young whales being hunted by the sea monsters. Liszt deduced this. He had seen some documentaries where humpback whales often targeted killer whales, launching thousand-mile rescue operations to save the prey that was about to fall into the mouth of the killer whales. There was no evidence to show why they did this, but they liked to do it chivalrously and courageously. During this voyage, apart from seeing a few whale escorts, there were no other memorable scenes, not even a single sea monster. There were many legends of sea monster attacks in the sea, but the number of times a crew actually encountered them was probably only once in their lifetime. The vast sea was too big, and sea monsters had fixed prey targets. There was no reason for them to attack ships made of wood and eat humans who were not even enough to fill their teeth. What prevented humans in this world from looking at the sea was the constraints of cognition, and the difficulty of obtaining resources in the sea was far greater than on land. In fact, if Liszt had a large piece of land on the continent, he would not think of developing the sea and leading the age of navigation. The deep sea always revealed a mysterious and gloomy atmosphere. Sometimes, when he stood at the bow of the ship and looked at the bottomless sea, he could not help but feel a trace of fear. It was too easy for the merciless sea to swallow a human. Cultivation, cultivation, cultivation. The boring 6.5-day voyage ended quickly. The fleet had already sailed to a large city in the Steel Ridge Kingdom, Coxcomb City, where they would meet, resupply, and collect information before launching an attack on the Sardinia Bay area. Chapter 464. Coxcomb City was located in the easternmost part of the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom. It was the central city of the territory of Marquis Ji-Ling, Benedict Gubwait. Marquis Ji-Ling's territory was called Rooster Hills and was said to be larger than Iron Hoof Island. Naturally, the land was so vast that the size of the territory was meaningless. Most of it was covered by primeval jungles, inhabited by a large number of World of Warcraft. Many primeval jungles were restricted areas for human activities. Even Sky Knights did not dare to rashly set foot in them for fear of being attacked by high-level World of Warcraft. Humans on the continent built large cities on flat plains and gathered along the roads between cities to ensure the safety of survival and communication. Many long-distance trades required orders of chivalry guards. Ordinary merchants could not afford to hire regular orders of chivalry guards, so they hired mercenary guards. Therefore, the existence of mercenary groups was always legal. Gubwesu is a fruit magic ingredient that tastes like a mixture of chocolate and pineapple. It is an expensive specialty of the Gubwesu family. It is said to be a variant of the cocoa fruit, which can be used to produce chocolate. Our country's chocolate is imported from Coxcomb City. The one who introduced Liszt was Captain Lydon. He was once again assigned to Liszt's subordinate, Orders of Chivalry. The Count had already gone to Rooster Hills Castle to attend the welcoming banquet hosted by Marquis Ji-Ling and hold a military conference. Liszt strolled around Coxcomb City, buying some local specialties. Chocolate sales are huge. Why is there no lord planting cocoa trees in our country? Probably because the climate is not suitable, or maybe there are no cocoa sprites. Coxcomb City was larger than Coral City. The buildings on both sides of the streets were 7-story wooden buildings. The residents ranged from richly dressed aristocrats to ragged serfs. There were also many knights dressed like them, presumably knights who participated in the Orders of Expansion. Hi, Viscount Liszt. Soon, someone took the initiative to greet Liszt. It was a young viscount from Golden Island who came to Coral Island to attend a wedding. Liszt recognized him. He had personally received him before. Viscount Cyril, you're also here to stroll around Coxcomb City? Haha, I am not interested in Coxcomb City. I am going to the Elven Market to see if there are any suitable sprite worms. I am going to buy a few. Elven Market? Liszt's interest was piqued. I also plan to go and have a look. Then let's go together. Following Viscount Cyril, the group soon arrived at the Elf Market located in a corner of Coxcomb City. This was a small wild sprite trading market, which did not sell many sprite worms. List had collected a magic book called Wild Sprite Worm Market Selling Prices, which recorded the sprite market. In Steel City, the capital of the Steel Ridge Kingdom, there was a large market for wild elves. The prices of elves there were clearly recorded in book. For example, a Venus flytrap sprite worm was sold for 3,600 gold coins. He had bought it from Viscount Jonas for 700 gold coins. However, mosquitoes and flies were rampant in Steel City. Every household liked to buy a Venus flytrap and grow it at home. Even if the Venus flytrap's ability to catch insects was very low, as long as the scale of cultivation was increased, the effect of catching mosquitoes and flies would still be good. On Coral Island, Venus flytraps were practically useless. There were not many mosquitoes and flies, and commoners could not afford them. Aristocrats had other ways to drive away mosquitoes and flies. Along the way, List gradually gained a clear understanding of the prices in this small sprite market. Their prices were similar to those in Steel City, generally around 1,000 or 2,000 gold coins. As for the useless sprite worms, their prices were around several hundred gold coins. As for the potion-related sprite worms, their prices went up to 2,000 gold coins. The most expensive sprite worm List saw was priced at 3,800 gold coins. It was a mystic fruit sprite worm. The mysterious fruit was not a potion, but it could enhance the human tongue's sense of taste, making it an excellent accompaniment to meals. It's too expensive. I won't be able to recoup the cost of buying it. Coral Island's population is too small, and there are not many aristocrats. There is no demand for the mysterious fruit. He shook his head, not intending to buy it. Instead, he wanted to buy some grain-type sprite worms. Unfortunately, the price of grain-type sprite worms was not cheap, not less than 2,000. The value of the grains produced by the sprite worms for 10 years simply could not make up for the price of the sprite worms themselves. If he bought it, it would evolve into a lesser sprite. Once it evolved, he would make a huge profit. After all, grains were an important component of human food. The grains produced by a lesser sprite could feed countless people. List was very short on grain-type sprites. He only had 1 wheat sprite worm, 1 corn sprite worm, and 2 wheat sprites worm. Perhaps the corn grass worm could also be regarded as a grain-type sprite worm. After all, he now had cob corn and corn. The wheat sprite worm costs 2,300 gold coins, which is not cost-effective. I don't have that many gold coins right now. Forget it, I'll wait for the territory to breed on its own. I have the smoke mission, so the source of sprite worms is not a problem. List silently calculated and gave up on the idea of buying. He was going to continue to look for the black nightshade sprite worm, rubber sprite worm, and thorn sprite worm. As long as the price of these 3 sprite worms was not outrageous, he would not hesitate to buy them. Unfortunately, after looking around, he did not find them. There were less than 100 sprite worms being traded in the elven market, most of which were useless sprite worms. The trade of sprite worms was not prosperous enough to begin with. Many of them were supplied by lesser aristocrats who were incapable of operating them. Greater aristocrats would only buy and not sell them. For aristocrats, sprites were always scarce. If Viscount Jonas had not encountered financial problems, he would not have sold the black nightshade sprite worm and the Venus flytrap worm. After leaving the elven market, List asked Captain Lydon, "When will the serf trade be held?" "Not yet, but once the war starts, mercenary groups will soon come to contact us. We only need to prepare a ship at the seaside, and the mercenary groups will escort a large number of serfs to trade. The time is very short, maybe within an hour, the trade will be completed, and then everyone will leave." Captain Lydon had participated in many development orders and was very clear about the serf trade. There were even some serf trades where the villages were plundered on the same day, and the serfs would be escorted to trade on the same day. Captain Lydon added, We can also contact the serf traders and have them buy the slaves. They always have a way to obtain a large number of slaves. Then we only need to wait for their worn-out wooden ships at the seaside. We don't even need to go ashore to complete the trade. This kind of serf trade was obviously to prevent the orders of chivalry from discovering the trade. It was a lot safer, but the serf traders would take a cut. It was better to directly trade with mercenary groups. Do our Coral Island generally trade directly, or do we contact the serf traders? Asked Liszt. Captain Lydon smiled mysteriously. Seeing that no one was approaching them, he said in a low voice, "Leader, do you know how those small lords who are often invaded along the coast survive? Their territories may not have much production, but the mercenary groups they raise are even bigger than some of the mercenary groups raised by the big lords. They are all secretly engaged in the slave trade." Chapter 465. The war had already begun. The Grand Duchy of Sapphire's orders of chivalry had participated in the war mainly to harass and restrain more of the Eagle Kingdom's orders of chivalry. Therefore, after resting in Coxcomb City for a day, the fleet set out to attack the established Sardinia Bay area. Marquis Ji-Ling also sent a large number of his followers to follow the Grand Duchy of Sapphire's fleet to attack the Sardinia Bay area. The Tulip family's fleet carried Marquis Ji-Ling's follower, Earl Bluestone, as well as his orders of chivalry, which numbered nearly 1,000 knights. "Herbert, this is my second son, Liszt. He is the Viscount of Black Horse Island and an elite Earth Knight." Lee William introduced Earl Bluestone to Earl Bluestone, who had just boarded the ship. "A very handsome young man. He looks very young. Liszt, how old are you?" Earl Bluestone Herbert asked. 17 years old, Earl Bluestone. The aristocratic titles of the mainland kingdoms were not named after the place, but were titles related to the territory. For example, Marquis Ji-Ling's title was Ji-Ling, which meant pheasant feathers. It originated from his fief, Pheasant Hills. In addition, the central city of his territory was also called Coxcomb City. The same was true for Earl Bluestone. His fief was Bluestone Valley, which was filled with a kind of blue stone. As for his full name, it was Herbert Tietelin. Tietelin was a type of flower. The naming of surnames in the mainland kingdoms was not much different from the naming of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire's surnames. The serf class among the commoners basically had no surnames. The wealthy among the free class would have despicable surnames. Some of the small aristocrats continued their despicable surnames, or changed to ordinary surnames. Only the middle and high-ranking aristocrats could use beautiful words such as flowers, grains, and metals as surnames. Although there were no explicit rules for surnames, ordinary people would be punished by the Lord if they dared to use beautiful words as surnames. There were even some minor nobles who used beautiful words as their surnames, but they were still suppressed by the major nobles and even destroyed. Earl Bluestone, who seemed to be a straightforward person, asked directly, a 17-year-old elite Earth Knight, very talented. "You are the second son of Earl Lee William, so the title of Viscount of Black Horse Island was earned by your own merits on the battlefield?" "Yes." "When did you enter the battlefield?" "This year." "This year." Count Bluestone was astonished. Lee William faintly said, "Herbert, you should know that the Grand Duchy of Sapphire suffered a mutiny. Liszt was promoted from Baron to Viscount of Black Horse Island because of his military exploits on Iron Hoof Island." "I've heard about the Battle of Iron Hoof Island. Just one battle and you're promoted to a Viscount. It seems like your son has made great contributions in the battle. He has an Earth-type intermediate world of Warcraft as a pet. He has conquered many castles and performed outstandingly in the final battle, earning Prince Anthony's admiration." "Lee William, will he inherit your title?" Herbert suddenly asked. Liszt answered himself, "Earl Bluestone, my brother Levis is the heir. He is also an elite Earth Knight." It's enviable that the family has so many excellent heirs. After exchanging a few pleasantries, Herbert and Lee William entered the cabin, while List continued to stay at the bow. He also had to train the 8 little ones in Dosen. They were about to enter the battlefield. He was still a little worried about the obedience and discipline of the 8 little ones. They were all immature cubs. They were not even a year old, and so far only knew rock thorns. As Captain Lawton said, the Coral Island fleet had just arrived at the coastline. Without experiencing a battle, they already had a small port, a city and a castle that were not much bigger than a small town. When the lord of this territory heard the news of an invader attack, he abandoned the territory early and fled. Thus, the Knights of the Coral Islands' Orders of Chivalry and Bluestone's Orders of Chivalry landed at the port one after another. Using this place as a springboard, they launched an attack on the Sardinia Bay area. Speed was of the essence in war. With practically no time to rest and prepare, the Earth Knights of the Orders of Chivalry entered a state of war one after another. List also had no time to lament over the sudden war. Riding a chocobo, he followed beside the Count. They looted towns and cities, besieged castles, and fought against the Orders of Chivalry who came to resist. There wasn't much strategy, just a primitive and barbaric charge, and charge again. In previous battles, the Coral Islands' Orders of Chivalry rarely attacked named castles because they were easy to defend and hard to attack. But this time, with the help of Dosen and the 8 little ones, they pushed forward. In just a day and a half, the Coral Islands' Orders of Chivalry, which had been separated from Bluestone's Orders of Chivalry, penetrated 300 kilometers into the mainland and attacked a named castle located by the River Bend Castle. Dosen, get ready to attack the castle. 8 little ones, follow Dosen. Listen to my command, Rockthorns. The Count watched over the battlefield while List personally commanded the Blizzard Beast to begin dismantling River Bend Castle. The other Orders of Chivalry Knight shot arrows to suppress the counterattack of River Bend Castle. A moment later, one side of River Bend Castle's wall collapsed, and Viscount Jonas took the lead and rushed towards the gap in the castle. Then all the knights swarmed towards River Bend Castle. In less than 10 minutes, the castle belonging to the Viscount fell under the powerful attack of the Coral Islands' Orders of Chivalry. The Viscount Lord died on the spot. Capture all the Earth Knights and count the castle's supplies. Lee William did not take action. Instead, he strolled the whole time and began to direct the finishing work. Captain Mickey, send Mouse to contact the nearby mercenary corps. We will trade supplies. In addition, pay close attention to the Orders of Chivalry in the surrounding territories and be ready to fight at any time. Yes, sir. Unlike the previous times when the captives were used to pay ransom, this time the Grand Duke allowed his followers to incorporate the captives themselves. Therefore, the Earth Knights who were not disabled in the war were the targets of incorporation. The Count was only interested in the elite Earth Knights. Moreover, the elite Earth Knights who were not old, did not have a high title, or did not even have a title at all. For the time being, it was not List's turn to prioritize the elite Earth Knights. His target was the young Earth Knight, preferably a single Earth Knight. Once such an Earth Knight was incorporated into his territory and married, they would quickly become loyal. Lee William looked at the tied-up Earth Knights and spoke slowly. You have become my captives. Your life and death are in my hands. Now I will give you the right to choose. First, write a letter to your family and lord and pay me a satisfactory ransom. Then you can go back. Second, if you do not have enough ransom, then you can pledge loyalty to me and my followers. The 40 or so Earth Knights who were not disabled looked at each other dejectedly. Captives and pledging loyalty were very common in the war on the continent. However, the Grand Duchy of Sapphire had never accepted the loyalty of captive. They did not know why it was different this time. Among them, 21 Earth Knights chose to pay the ransom. The remaining 26 Earth Knights chose to pledge loyalty to the Grand Duke. First, the Count chose 3 young elite Earth Knights. Then, the 3 Viscounts took turns to choose. List had the highest military service and was ranked first, so he could choose one first. He looked at the remaining Earth Knights. There were only 2 elites, one old and one middle-aged. Needless to say, he chose the middle-aged elite Earth Knight. "Tell me your name." List was wearing a bright silver mithril armor. Although he was young, the knights could clearly see that he was surrounded by a group of powerful World of Warcraft players. So, Chapter 466. In addition to the elite Earth Knight, Vader, List also chose 4 Earth Knights. Counting the 3 chosen by the Count and the 15 chosen by the Viscount, there were 8 old and weak Earth Knights left for the Baron to choose from. And so, the first Knight recruitment was completed. The loyalty of these Knights could not be guaranteed. Their future depended on their performance. As for the Knight who chose to pay the ransom, they were simply tied up. However, there was no need to worry. The Knight was a group of trustworthy people on the battlefield. Being a captive was nothing. They could still eat, drink, sleep, and even attend banquets as long as they paid the ransom. Nationalism had not developed in this era, and the feudal system led to a lack of national color. Therefore, the most fanatical nationalism and patriotism had not sprouted. The War of the Knight was for each other's interests. It was a contest of strength between the nobles. It was similar to arm wrestling. The victors would not mistreat the captives, and the captives naturally did not have to deliberately escape. They could eat and drink, wait for their families or lords to deliver the ransom, and then go home happily. As long as they did not die in battle, the battlefield was as leisurely as a vacation. Of course, once defeated, the captives had to bleed to redeem themselves. While resting in the castle, the 5 Earth Knights who had just chosen to pledge allegiance quickly mingled with the Knight of the Flower Squad, raising their glasses and drinking together. List still felt that it was ridiculous. War was such a serious matter, but it was like a game to the Knight. Perhaps it really is just a game of plunder. Attacking the Sardinia Bay area is to plunder resources, not to occupy the land. He picked up his glass and took a sip in response to a newly pledged Earth Knight who toasted him. He suddenly felt that this was also good. If he was defeated one day, he could pay the ransom to redeem himself. It would be best if he did not die. "My lord, Vader has a request. I don't know if you will allow it." Vader suddenly saluted solemnly. He spoke in Serpentine. The Sardinia Bay region was close to the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom and shared a common border with the Rooster Hills. Many Knight knew Wind language and Serpentine. "Please speak, Knight Vader. On the eve of the war, my family had just moved. I let them hide in a village in a small town nearby. I would like to ask for your permission to bring them here and accompany you back to the Grand Duchy of Sapphire after the war." Loyalty to the Knight's family. Of course, he had to allow it. After all, he had family to tie him down, and his loyalty wouldn't be too low. At the very least, when the Knight was defeated, there was a high chance that he would choose to pay the ransom, provided that he had enough money to pay the ransom. It was precisely because the local Viscounts had died in battle, and there was no lord to pay a ransom for them, that these commoner Earth Knights without titles would easily choose to be loyal. He couldn't just stubbornly wait for death. "Teacher Marcus, I need you to take some people with you and ask Vader to write a letter to bring back his family. Then let them leave here by boat first and return to the territory with the serfs." List didn't let Vader pick up his family in person because he didn't trust him enough. He was going to pick up his family and send them to Black Horse Island first. In this way, Vader, who had no worries, could quickly integrate into the Knight squad. Then, he looked at the 4 Earth Knights. "What about your family? Do you need to pick them up?" The 3 Earth Knights told him where their family was hiding. Only one Earth Knight hesitated. "My lord, I am an illegitimate child, and am not valued by my family. They are just a group of strangers to me. My mother was a serf and has passed away. In my territory, illegitimate children will not be an obstacle. List raised his eyebrows. You are still young. After following me, opportunities to change your fate are everywhere. The Earth Knight immediately knelt on one knee. I am willing to serve my lord. He looked very excited. Once, as the second son of a noble, he was not valued and even suppressed. The lord he followed also did not value him. There was almost no hope of changing his fate. So after the defeat, he couldn't even pay the ransom. He thought that he would probably be sent to the mines and workshops to work until he died. He didn't expect that he could choose to pledge allegiance again. This was simply great news. The former Grand Duchy of Sapphire was not allowed to take in prisoners. They had to pay the ransom or be imprisoned as hard labor. More importantly, the Lord did not care about his illegitimate identity. Weapons, armor, utensils, food. After the materials paid were counted, they were immediately distributed to each knight according to their merits. Of course, these materials would not be distributed now. They would all be transported to the small port town by the sea. There, many mercenary groups and second-hand dealers would come to trade gems, crystals, jade, and metals. Of course, the serf trade was also part of it. Father, I don't need other materials, I just want serfs. List's purpose was clear. I will let Captain Mickey convert your part of the spoils of war into serfs, and part of the merchant ships will be transferred to transport serfs for you. Thank you, Father. Don't forget to pay the rental fee. You have to give me a discount, at least 20% cheaper than renting my uncle's merchant ship. 10%, no more. If you weren't my son, I'd charge you a 30% premium. All right. It was normal for a father and son to talk about business. After all, List had been in theft and was an independent individual. He let Marcus leave the night squad and take charge of the serf trade alone. Teacher Marcus, the serfs sent by the mercenary group can be accepted as long as they are not sick. Even disabled serfs can be sent to Black Horse Island as long as they have a little skill. My lord, I understand. The serf trade had begun. The pace of the war was also advancing rapidly. Maintaining contact with other orders of chivalry, the Coral Island Orders of Chivalry set off again after resting in River Bay Castle for a night to attack a wider area and plunder all the wealth on the earth. The Lesser Lords' Orders of Chivalry could not stop their attack at all. List, in particular, led 9 blizzard beasts to participate in the charge every time. A burst of rock thorns could always disrupt the enemy Orders of Chivalry's formation and complete the defeat. One brilliant victory after another was harvested. Even if those Orders of Chivalry hid in the castle, it was difficult to resist the earth magic of the blizzard beasts. For a time, with him as the arrowhead, the Coral Island Orders of Chivalry took down 4 small cities and directly entered the first big city, Falcon City, the territory of the Peregrine Falcon Count. The meaning of the name Falcon City was that the Peregrine Falcon witnessed the city. The Peregrine Falcon naturally referred to the Peregrine Falcon Count. Tusk Sweet Cherry Leaf. At this moment, in the Sweet Cherry Leaf Castle on the eastern hillside of Falcon City, the Peregrine Falcon Count's face was gloomy and he held a meeting of his followers. After receiving a warning from the Rattlesnake Marquis, the disgusting flies of Sapphire have come again. This time they chose the Sardinia Bay area. The Pheasant Marquis on the other side is also coming, so all the lords of Sardinia Bay must unite. The followers howled, "Yes, my lord!" Chapter 467. Fragrant Chariot Castle was not tall, at least compared to Tulip Castle, there was still a gap. However, Falcon City at the foot of the mountain was far larger than Coral City. Coral City had a population of about 30,000, while Falcon City had a population of at least 40,000 to 50,000. Sir, if we plunder Falcon City, the assault formation will inevitably be disrupted. Orders of chivalry of fragrant chariot castle will launch a charge at any time and defeat us. Viscount Trick led the orders of chivalry around Falcon City, and came to report. Although the city was not as strong as the castle, however, it also had a basic city wall and many apprentice night guards. It would not be easy to break through under the rain of arrows. Not to mention the elite orders of chivalry of fragrant chariot castle, eyeing them covetously. In the past, orders of chivalry of Coral Island would directly skip the big cities and loot small cities and rural towns. Encountering a mine would be tantamount to making a fortune. At this time, orders of chivalry, who were hiding in the castle, would have to consider whether to come out and fight, or remain trapped in the castle and not come out, allowing the orders of chivalry of Coral Island to plunder and leave. But now Lee William glanced at his second son, who was becoming more and more calm, and the black behemoth beside him, and confidently said, "Then let's first defeat Fragrant Chariot Castle, and then plunder Falcon City." His gaze shifted to List. "Is Dosen ready?" "Dosen can attack the city at any time, sir." List patted Dosen's big head. Dosen, who was almost 2 years old, had matured in all aspects of his body, and was particularly skilled in the 4 types of magic. He had basically reached the peak level of his bloodline. "Then, let's start the siege. Leave Sacred Swordsman Tasker to me. You are responsible for suppressing the archers of Fragrant Chariot Castle and counterattacking Dosen and the 8 blizzard beasts. The main force is to attack the city." The order was issued. The battle was about to begin. The Coral Islands master archers of orders of chivalry surrounded Fragrant Chariot Castle and fired at the knight on top of the city wall. List, riding on the back of the chocobo Loki and holding the swift shadow bow, began to command the blizzard beasts to attack the city. The 8 little ones were responsible for prying up the city wall with rock spikes, while Dosen was responsible for bombarding the city wall with rock grenade. The combat aura of the knights could shatter the mana in the air and cast spells, but it couldn't shatter the spells released by the mana in World of Warcraft. However, during the siege, List discovered that Fragrant Chariot Castle unexpectedly released a few spells, injuring several knights of the Coral Islands orders of chivalry. Fragrant Chariot Castle also has World of Warcraft, but fortunately, it should be a low-level World of Warcraft that can only cast Wind Blade and Fireball. He cast Magic Eyes and quickly locked onto the castle's shooting hole. He could distinguish the non-humanoid magic radiant. Soon, he found the constantly changing position of World of Warcraft, drew the swift shadow bow to a full moon, and charged up an arrow dipped in poison. He had already practiced multiple arrows to the proficiency level. When World of Warcraft just poked its head out to release magic, he loosened the bowstring and shot an arrow. Whoosh! The arrow spun through the air in a trajectory hard to see with the naked eye, accurately flew into the shooting hole, and plunged into the mouth of World of Warcraft. There seemed to be a cry of World of Warcraft in his ears. World of Warcraft, which had poked its head out from the shooting hole, had already retreated into the castle, no longer showing its head. The corners of List's mouth rose slightly. His archery had probably reached the acme of perfection. Looking at the Coral Islands' nearly 1,000 Earth Knights, he should be the one with the strongest archery. Training archery every day, coupled with his superior talent, was not in vain. Coupled with Magic Eyes, the effect was even better. The bowstring was pulled to a full moon again, and he aimed at the second World of Warcraft. When this World of Warcraft also poked its head out to release magic, another arrow was shot, spinning and plunging into the mouth of World of Warcraft. Screams were heard again. World of Warcraft retreated into the castle. He didn't know if the 2 World of Warcraft were dead, but the arrows were dipped in the high-purity poison of fast-growing poisonous thorns. Even if they were not dead, World of Warcraft would lose a layer of skin. When shooting people, he followed the knight's rules and did not use poisoned arrows. But shooting World of Warcraft was not so particular. Suddenly, he shouted, "Rock, come back!" It turned out that Rock, the blizzard beast, was excited and rushed into the range of the rain of arrows. List could shoot Fragrant Chariot Castle's World of Warcraft, and the castle's sharpshooter naturally dared to shoot his World of Warcraft. So he immediately called back Rock, keeping the 8 small ones out of the range of the rain of arrows. The discipline of the 8 small ones had to be strengthened. Only Dosen did not need List to worry too much. He directly put on a body of stone armor and rushed forward, throwing rock grenades at close range and bombarding the city wall. Cracks appeared one after another on the city wall. After exhausting his magic power, the attack was suspended and the knight retreated like a tide, waiting for Dosen to replenish his magic power again and continue the siege. After the Battle of Iron Hoof Island, the Coral Island Knight's knight already knew how to cooperate with Dosen's rhythm, attacking wave after wave. "Father, do you think we can capture the Burning Sword Saint?" List asked during the break. Lee William shook his head. "It's very difficult. The Sky Knight's strength has reached the Sacred Swordsman level. Even if there is a big gap in their attack power, their ability to escape definitely has their own merit. Moreover, I am not good at tracking my opponent. My Chi and Chi secret manuals are not outstanding in terms of speed." He cultivated the high-grade water attribute Chi secret manual Giant Wave Breaks the Tide, which was superior in endurance, tough attack, and excellent defense. However, his explosive power was slightly lacking, and his speed was also very mediocre. "I don't know what high-grade Chi secret manual task he has. It would be great if we could seize his Chi secret manual," List said expectantly. Sacred Swordsman Tasky Fragrant Chariot Leaf. From the title of Sacred Swordsman, it could be seen that his Chi was of the fire attribute. He had already obtained a high-grade fire attribute Chi secret manual Red Sun Rising Flame, but he did not mind having a new high-grade Chi secret manual. Only by referring to each other could he achieve great success. Although cultivating more Chi secret manuals did not necessarily mean that the more techniques one practiced, it could even lead to problems in cultivation due to the conflict between technique. However, List believed that with his comprehension ability, he could overcome such obstacles. The Count said, "It is very likely that he will carry the Chi secret manual with him. As long as we can't catch him, there is no way to obtain the Chi secret manual." The father and son discussed the post-war issues. They simply did not pay any attention to the Fragrant Chariot Castle. However, without waiting for them to rest, the warning bugle suddenly sounded. The Fragrant Chariot Castle's orders of chivalry rushed out of the castle and brazenly charged towards the Coral Islands camp of orders of chivalry. With binoculars, the Fragrant Chariot Castle's movements were immediately discovered. "I thought he was a coward, but I didn't expect Tasky Fragrant Chariot to be so hot-blooded. In that case, let me obliterate his hot-bloodedness." Lee Williams suddenly stood up. High-grade Chi surged around his body, giving people the pressure of a vast ocean that was about to set off towering waves. List also quickly stood up and returned to his orders of chivalry, getting into formation to meet the enemy. Chapter 468. Charge. On the battlefield, the 2 armored torrents collided. It should have been a well-matched scene, but there was an unexpected trend. The orders of chivalry led by List was like a sharp knife, quickly piercing through the formation of the orders of chivalry destroyed by the blizzard beasts, defeating the opponent in one battle. He then changed his direction and rushed to the side of the orders of chivalry. He himself was surrounded by the blizzard beasts, and Dosen, clad in stone armor, was sweeping in front. There was no Earth Knight that could stop him. As he ran amok, he dealt a huge blow to the knights of the Fragrant Chariot Castle. Moreover, it was a huge blow that affected the entire group. The orders of chivalry, which were defeated by him, were quickly taken over by the other orders of chivalry of Coral Island, which were madly sprinting and attacking. A new formation could not be established at all. From the very beginning, the trend of the battle was doomed. As long as the number of orders of chivalry was not several times that of the Coral Island, or had many Sky Knights to help, the orders of chivalry of Coral Island with blizzard beasts were absolutely invincible among the Earth-level orders of chivalry. Tusk, who was watching from the side of the battlefield, trembled with anger when he saw his knight being taken away by a wave of attack. Damn intermediate World of Warcraft! Destroying my walls and disrupting my formation, damn it! He fiercely stirred up his chi, turned into a flame and rushed into the sky. He fell down again, ready to bombard the blizzard beast. However, before he could land, he heard a loud shout in his ear. "Tusk, have you asked for my sword?" It was accompanied by a silver-white sword light. It was Lee William who launched a brazen attack. The opponent of the Sky Knight should naturally be the Sky Knight. He broke away from the charge of the Earth Knight and began to fight with his sword at high altitude. "Get lost!" Tusk waved his sword to resist. Boom! 2 high-level chi exploded in midair. Half of it was flame and the other half was water vapor. Lee William rushed out of the water vapor, his momentum undiminished. "You talk big, but your strength is too low." Tusk couldn't spare any attention to talk to Lee William. He was fully focused on his sword fight with Lee William. Suddenly, he caught a glimpse of 3 arrows shooting at him from the ground. These 3 arrows had erratic trajectories and were as fast as lightning, forcing him to withdraw his sword move and twist his body to dodge. Clang! However, when the arrows were about to brush past his shoulder, they actually collided with each other once. Then, the 3 arrows changed directions and headed straight for his body. The longsword returned and quickly deflected the strange arrow. Tasker didn't even have time to heave a sigh of relief before William's attack arrived. The sword bombarded him and sent him flying from midair. He fell to the ground and rolled a few times before stopping. Then, he had to face Lee William's relentless barrage of attacks. Not far away, List, who commanded the orders of chivalry to charge forward, put away the swift shadow bow. He was very satisfied with the power of his triple arrow chain. Although it didn't hurt Tusk in the slightest, it successfully broke his initiative and put him in a passive position. This proved that he already had the qualifications to intervene in the Sky Knight's sword fight. After taking potions for a long period of time, including supplementary potions and magic potions, his fighting energy grew at a rapid pace. Coupled with the fact that the aura decay could slow down the loss of his fighting energy, he was improving at every moment. His training as an elite Earth Knight far surpassed that of anyone else. If it wasn't for the magic fire seed in his heart that was competing with him for nourishment, he suspected that he would have reached the limit of an elite Earth Knight after half a month of training. Then, he would break through the bottleneck of his fighting energy and advance to a Sky Knight. "It'll be soon." Chris hurried to refine all the supplementary Black Nightshade into Black Nightshade supplementary potions before I set off. Then, together with the Fire Magic Potion and the Thorn Magic Potion, they should be enough for me to stay on the battlefield for a month. I'll see if I can break through once in a month. If I fail, then I'll wait until I get back. His thoughts wandered for a moment. He had to focus on commanding the orders of chivalry to charge forward. 20 minutes later, at the end of the battle, the orders of chivalry of Fragrant Chariot Castle were routed. The Sacred Swordsman Tasker was also no match for the Sacred Swordsman of Waves Lee William. He led the remaining several hundred knights and fled back to Fragrant Chariot Castle. Then, without hesitation, he abandoned Fragrant Chariot Castle and fled into the distance without looking back. It was a brilliant victory. The casualties of the Coral Islands Orders of Chivalry Knight was less than 1/10, but more than 300 Earth Knights were captured. There was no doubt that at least half of the more than 300 Earth Knights would accept allegiance and reorganization to replenish the losses of the Coral Islands Orders of Chivalry. The subsequent reorganization process was indeed the same. The Count of the Peregrine Falcon had already fled. Although he had taken away the fragrant chariot castle's valuables, including elves, there were still a large number of supplies left in the castle. This meant that the Count of the Peregrine Falcon had suffered heavy losses and might not be able to pay the ransom for the captured Earth Knights. The knights without money could only accept the reorganization. 116 Earth Knights chose to pay the ransom. 242 Earth Knights chose to accept the reorganization. List added 7 elite Earth Knights and 27 Earth Knight. In addition to the 3 elite Earth Knights and 16 Earth Knights that had been incorporated in succession. Not long after the expansion order began, his subordinates had been supplemented with 10 elite Earth Knights and 43 ordinary Earth Knight. At present, the Flower Town's Knight Squad had not suffered any losses. It had a full complement of 12 members, and there were still 7 Earth Knights in his territory. Therefore, he already had a total of 12 elite Earth Knights and 60 ordinary Earth Knight. He could form 6 Knight Squads, which was not far from forming 1 Orders of Chivalry. However, he was not prepared to continue to incorporate more troop. 1 Orders of Chivalry was too costly, and his territory could not afford it for the time being. You can write to your families immediately, and I will send a knight to pick them up and send them to settle in my territory, Black Horse Island. You will stay and assist me in continuing the expansion campaign. List said seriously to the newly reorganized knight. The best way to control them was to take their families away together. It was difficult to leave their homeland, but they had been defeated and were loyal to the Lord again. The knight could only write letters to pick up their families. It takes time to pick up people, reorganize, and count the harvest. Coral Island Orders of Chivalry were temporarily stationed in Fragrant Chariot Castle and were not prepared to continue to attack other aristocratic territories for a short time. Because there was still a big city, Hayami City, that could be plundered. This is a huge harvest. In the past, we may have gone thousands of kilometers or even farther to plunder all the materials on the earth. But it is rare to capture large castles and large cities. List, your blizzard beast is the biggest contributor. At the dinner party, the Count raised his glass to List with relief. List smiled. Father, I just did what I had to do. I am proud of you, my son. Lee William drank the wine in his glass. The food and wine were all stored in the castle. List also drank it in one gulp. A brilliant victory on the battlefield. His achievements were certainly second only to the Count, which was undoubtedly great. It was a pity that he did not plunder metal mines. Metal mines were the biggest indicator of the orders of expansion. The Count put down his glass. He looked around and raised his glass again. The war is far from over, and danger is coming at any time. Everyone is limited to this last glass. Let us raise our glasses together and celebrate this brilliant victory. Everyone raised their glasses together. Glory to the Knight, glory to the Lord. Chapter 469. Over the next few days it was time for harvest. Count Peregrine Falcon did not come to retaliate and reclaim his territory and castle, allowing the Coral Island Orders of Chivalry to completely plunder Falcon City. Not a single sprite worm was found, and none of the knight who paid the ransom was willing to contribute sprite worms. Before the war began, Count Peregrine Falcon and his followers were ready to transfer the important sprite worms and other materials away. Viscount Jonas complained. Viscount Trick sighed with emotion. At least the materials we obtained are far more than in the past. He recalled the past. In my memory, following Sir for nearly 20 years, there were only 3 times when the harvest was greater than this time. The first time was a 1,000-mile raid to plunder a large iron mine, which led to the pursuit of the Dragon Knight. The second time was to capture the Sky Knight and get 2 lesser sprites as ransom. The third time was to plunder a large number of gems. Indeed, this time we not only plundered a lot of materials, but also completed the involvement of the surrounding territories. There will be a lot of meritorious service. Moreover, we can incorporate prisoners, which is of great benefit to the replenishment of our knight subordinate. Speaking of which, if it were not for the sudden rise of Viscount List, it would not have been easy to achieve such a brilliant victory. Trix said, without Dosen's siege deterrence, forcing the burning sword sage to charge, we would not have had a chance to break through fragrant chariot castle. He has not only Dosen, but also 8 blizzard beasts. No wonder everyone calls him the Son of Glory. This time, his harvest is second only to the Count's. He chose to buy serfs. With his spoils of war, he can probably buy more than 10,000 serfs, and the development of his territory will soon surpass ours. Trix suddenly asked, Jonas, where do you think Viscount List will be in the future? Jonas frowned and thought for a moment before shaking his head and replying, I don't know, but I believe that if Sir Count goes further and becomes the new Marquis of the Grand Duchy, then Viscount List will be worthy of the status of Count in the future. I think so as well. Who would have expected that the inconspicuous second son of the Tulip family would become such a dazzling existence? The knight's glory is all on him. Actually, it's not just the knight glory's blessing. His strength is also outstanding. I feel that the strength he displayed this time has already surpassed mine. Especially his archery, he can already participate in a battle between Sky Knight. If he cooperates with Dosen, I have no doubt that they can defeat a Sky Knight. Is that so? He's already so powerful? He was a trainee knight before he came of age, right? I don't know how he cultivates, but it won't be long before he becomes a Sky Knight. Yunus recalled his interactions with List and made such a prediction. Trix was a little skeptical. I don't feel that his aura is stronger than during the Battle of Iron Hoof Island. I also noticed this, but his strength has indeed become stronger. Yunus shrugged his shoulders. As for whether it's true or not, perhaps we'll find out soon enough. Maybe. Others were discussing the strength of List. In the past year or two, his limelight was so strong that it was unparalleled on Coral Island. The birth of lesser elves, the breeding of intermediate World of Warcraft, the promotion to Viscount, the acquisition of a fief island, and the strength of the elite Earth Knight, which even surpassed that of the veteran potion school, had changed too much. On the monotonous Coral Island, no one would refute calling List the Son of Glory. In the past, List was very opposed to such a high profile. However, after a conversation with Marquis Merlin, he understood that being low-key was not necessarily the best choice. He was the son of an earl and had the blood of a marquis. He was born to be superior. Showing his talent, as long as it was not too shocking, would only bring benefits and no harm. If he had hidden his strength during the Battle of Iron Hoof Island, how could he have been granted the title of Viscount on Black Horse Island? If this development made him hide his strength, how could he collect military merits, spoils of war, buy a large number of serfs, and rob a large number of craftsmen in Hayami City? Sir, after negotiations, we have persuaded 110 craftsmen to take their families to settle on Black Horse Island. Marcus said excitedly. Very well, after these craftsmen board the ship, be sure to tell the accompanying retainer knight to take care of them and not let them die needlessly. Understood, sir. By the way, Teacher Marcus, what is the result of the serf trade with the mercenary group? We have submitted enough spoils of war, and the mercenary group is driving the serfs to the port to trade with us. The fleet of Red Crab Island has also rented us 20 merchant ships to transport serfs. Together with the merchant ships of Coral Island, we have 30 merchant ships to transport serfs. A 2-masted merchant ship could carry 300 people while ensuring that the serfs could ride in good health. 30 merchant ships would carry 9,000 people. Our spoils of war are enough to transport 2 serfs, right? List asked again. He was mainly responsible for the war, and Marcus had become his right-hand man in the serf trade. Marcus shook his head. The mercenary group is too ruthless. The spoils of war here are generally 1/3 to 1/5 cheaper than on Coral Island. After we save the cost of renting merchant ships, we can probably buy 13,000 serfs. 13,000 serfs. This was far beyond the bottom line of List's mind. But he was still greedy. I will find a way to borrow some money and try to fill the merchant ships again. Sir, we have bought so many serfs, I am afraid the food stocks in the territory are not enough. Marcus said, before you left, you had stored enough food for 10,000 people for the winter. If we transport 18,000 serfs, the food will certainly not be enough. Then borrow money, rent the idle merchant ships of other nobles, and transport food back. The more bold a person was, the more productive he was. He was no longer satisfied with small businesses, what he wanted was leapfrogging development. Renting merchant ships at this time will certainly require a high price. Every great lord comes to the Eagle Kingdom to plunder supplies and transport them back to their territories. This is not necessarily true. Not all lords can lead the orders of chivalry to capture the castle and plunder so many supplies. I remember that during the last orders of expansion, the family fleet was not loaded with supplies, and several merchant ships returned empty. List motioned to Marcus to go ahead and rent them. As long as he was willing to spend money, empty ships could definitely be rented and food could definitely be bought. Borrowing money once was borrowing money again was still borrowing money. He believed that he could get enough gold coins from Count Llywelyn and Uncle Masilo to buy empty ships and load food. At the same time, he would also send a letter to Gort, so that Gort would increase his efforts to purchase grain and store more food for the winter. But then again, Gort is too slow. The smoke mission has not been completed yet. I don't know if he has not stored enough food. Without the smoke mission, I feel that the rewards of this orders of expansion may not be more than the rewards of the Battle of Iron Hoof Island. Chapter 470. On the grassland, if an antelope was killed, then the lion that killed it would enjoy the delicious part first, then the hyena would wait to enjoy the leftovers, then the vultures would wander around ready to buckle some residue from the bones, and finally the flies would buzz around the bones and the remaining carrion, leaving maggots for the final carnival. There was no doubt. Fragrant Chariot Castle was captured, Falcon City was plundered, and the orders of chivalry of Coral Island was the predator, enjoying the most delicious part. Then the mercenary corps and second-hand dealers rushed in to share the rest of the supplies. Rats, thieves, and so on would come to carve up the leaked supplies. So much so that List saw such a scene and felt that the fruits of his and others' desperate charge were not even 1/3 eaten. The rest were all taken away by mercenaries, dealers, rats, and so on. This was the ecological environment of the coastline of the Eagle Kingdom. It was hard to say how many of these mercenary corps were raised by the local lords of Sardinia Bay. It could be said that these lords themselves were also eating each other's corpses, becoming an important part of the entire ecological chain. Without the channels they provided, it would be difficult to digest the supplies quickly. Only by meeting the needs of most of the creatures in the ecological chain could the chain be maintained and not easily collapsed. Without any mercenary groups to pass on the losses, it was likely that they would have to face night groups that would fight to the death every year for the expansion order. Although most of the supplies were shared, List was still satisfied with the opening order. He came for the serfs. Now 30 merchant ships carrying nearly 8,500 serfs and more than 500 knight relatives returned to Black Horse Island. This trip alone had met his pre-war expectations, and the rest was a big profit. At the same time, he received a message. It was from the Golden Wheaton family knight who participated in the opening order. Viscount List, I bring a message from Sir Roger. I heard that you are renting free merchant ships at a high price to transport food. Sir Roger is ready to provide you with 30 free merchant ships, and you can delay the rental payment. Someone brought a pillow when he was sleepy. Although List knew that the two families were already connected by marriage, the benefits still had to be made clear in advance. Sir Roger has provided such great benefits. What does he need me to do? Sir Roger hopes that you can bring your intermediate world of Warcraft Dosen to help him capture Count Phalian's castle, the Castle of Hands. He will calculate your reward according to normal battle achievements and protect you and Dosen. Wait a moment, I need to ask the Earl. List quickly relayed the news to his father. Roger Goldenwheat had come to ask for help only to borrow Dosen's siege ability and provide protection. This seemed to be a free merit. After Lee William heard it, he said, "It just so happens that I don't intend to continue plundering. Our Coral Islands Orders of Chivalry has performed outstandingly in capturing the fragrant Chariot Castle. If he made any big moves, he would attract Marquis Snaketooth's attention. According to the information exchanged, Marquis Roderick is confronting Count Peregrine Falcon's lord, Marquis Snaketooth. It would be better to let Roger divert his attention." Count Phalian Russell Five-Fingered Orange was also one of Marquis Snaketooth's followers. Marquis Snaketooth was one of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire's great lords in Sardinia Bay. His territory was the Grand Duchy of Sapphire's main offensive direction. The original battle plan was to restrain Count Peregrine Falcon on Coral Island and cut off one of Marquis Snaketooth's arms. But now, it was a bit ruthless and fragrant Chariot Castle had fallen. "Then I'll go support Roger. Be careful. Russell Five-Fingered Orange is known as the Swift Swordsman. He has wind-attributed chi and is as fast as lightning," Lee William reminded. However, List's eyes suddenly lit up. A wind-attributed sacred swordsman? In order to increase the safety of the voyage, he had brought a Wind Divine bead this time. After thinking about it, he took out the Wind Divine bead and dispersed the wind-attributed magic power within a radius of several hundred meters. Even if the sacred swordsman's chi originated from himself and could not be dispersed, the chi moves he released would definitely be greatly reduced. As a result, didn't that mean that he could even take the Swift Swordsman by surprise and cooperate with others? As if he had guessed List's thoughts, William Lee could not help but warn him. "I know you have the Black Pearl that can disperse wind-attribute magic. However, I have tested it and found that it has a limited effect on a knight's outburst of fighting aura. The high-ranked fighting aura of a Sky Knight is special in nature. The degree of reduction is definitely smaller than you think. I will be careful. If it is impossible, I will not act rashly." "That's good. After the battlefield in Fragrant Chariot Castle is cleaned up, I will lead the Coral Island Orders of Chivalry to rendezvous with Marquis Roderick. Let's meet there." "Yes, father." After everything was settled, List rode the Chocobo Loki with Dosen and the other 9 blizzard beasts. He led his own knight squad that had expanded to more than 50 people and a full Orders of Chivalry to follow the Knight of the Golden Wheatear family towards the Castle of the Hands. On the way, he took out his binoculars from time to time to observe the environment around the road. In order to ensure that he would not be ambushed, coupled with the sensitivity of magic eyes to magic power, it would not be easy for the enemy to ambush him. Along the way, he would still call out the smoke mission from time to time to check the progress of the mission. At this moment, he found that the smoke mission suddenly changed. Mission completed, reward, a corn sprite. His mood was suddenly filled with surprise. The sprite is in hand, and it is the corn sprite I guessed. Such a sprite is very valuable. It represents a harvest of grain. The territory's food crisis can finally be relieved, and corn can feed more serfs. It was conceivable that the corn grassworm, thousands of miles away, was probably entering the fat pupa stage. List was not around to take care of it, and even the telepathic link of the contract was blurred and invisible due to the distance. He could only hope that under the smoke mission's threat of fate, the corn grassworm could smoothly evolve into a corn sprite. It was useless to worry. He wisely chose not to worry and began to check the new mission. Mission: Earl Philion hides in the Castle of the Hands, constantly threatening the flank security of the Orders of Chivalry of Golden Island, so that Marquis Roderick cannot attack the territory of the Snake Fang Marquis. His son, Roger, therefore asks for your help. Please cooperate to capture the Castle of the Hands. Reward: the germination of a magic fire seed. Huh! List's eyes were cold. The mission content was not surprising, but the reward made him think. The magic fire seed had been in his heart for a long time, always competing with him for nutrients, but it did not give him the slightest possibility of driving it. It was like a tumor, making him look forward to it, but also a knot in his heart. He always felt that there was something uncontrollable in his body. It was very uncomfortable. The magic fire seed is about to germinate. Is it really going to grow into a tree, or is it going to suck my body dry? After thinking for a long time, he secretly shook his head and stopped thinking about this problem. He believed that the smoke mission would not harm him. Chapter 471. They met up with Roger Goldenotes smoothly. While resting, List learned about the situation of the entire front from Roger. Golden Island Orders of Chivalry needed to attack the territory of the Great Lord of the Sardine Bay area, the Snake Mountain Ridge. The Snake-Tooth Marquis has 4 Earl followers who guard the 4 surrounding territories. Among them, the territory of Earl Peregrine belongs to the direction of the Coral Island Orders of Chivalry, and the others belong to the direction of Marquis Roderick and his followers. Among them, Roger and Viscount Fredo Curvethorn, who had just been promoted to Sword Saint but had not yet become an earl, were attacking the Castle of Hands of Earl Peregrine. The swift Sword Saint is very strong. I am at a disadvantage against him. Fredo stared at Dosen and said indifferently. He is known as the Galloping Sword Saint and is a Sky Knight of the Thunder attribute. Because of some personality reasons, he has not been promoted to Earl in recent years. Roger explained, Fredo can only lead the swift Sword Saint away, but the Castle of Hands is very strong and we can't attack it. This means that Earl Peregrine's Orders of Chivalry can cross our blockade at any time and charge to other territories, making it impossible for us to grab supplies. I can let the Blizzard Beasts participate in the siege, but you must protect my safety. Don't worry, List, I will go with you to the walls of the Castle of Hands. My Orders of Chivalry will do its best to protect you and me. Roger was just an elite Earth Knight who took drugs. He naturally needed the protection of Orders of Chivalry on the battlefield. So when will the siege start? The sooner the better, as long as you are ready. I can go at any time. So, the siege quickly unfolded. The Blizzard Beasts were like mobile turrets, constantly releasing earth magic and hitting the walls of the Castle of Hands. With the Blizzard Beasts, Roger's Orders of Chivalry could launch attacks in an orderly manner, forcing the Orders of Chivalry in the castle to fight. Because if they did not fight, the walls of the castle would collapse sooner or later. The swift Sword Saint couldn't stand this situation and rushed out of the castle, wanting to attack the Blizzard Beast. His speed was as fast as a beam of light, but the Galloping Sword Saint was not slow either. He met the swift Flying Sword Saint's surprise attack with a loud bang. It became a duel between the 2 Sky Knights again. On the back of the Chocobo Loki, List touched the wind-calming divine bead that had been taken out of the gem space. While commanding the Blizzard Beast to attack, he pondered. Should he participate in the battle between Sword Saints? Reason told him that as long as he could steadily attack the city, he would leave the rest to Roger to worry about. In any case, the casualties of the war would be borne by the Golden Wheat family. But his self-confidence was off the charts. When Lee William was fighting against the Scorching Swordmaster, he had also intervened. In the Battle of Iron Hoof Island, he had even fought side by side with Lee William to kill Count Snade. As an Earth Knight intercepting and killing a Sky Knight, the thought of it made his blood boil. Moreover, he also wanted to try the wind-calming divine bead suppression effect on the wind attribute Sky Knight. Roger, if I assist the galloping Sword Saint and intercept the swift flying Sword Saint, how are you going to calculate my merits? What, intercept and kill the swift flying Sword Saint? Roger looked at List suspiciously. I understand that you have intermediate World of Warcraft, but I don't recommend that you participate in the battle between Sword Saints. The attack speed of the swift flying Sword Saint is terrible. List, be patient, we will attack the city. Roger nodded. List couldn't deny it. He was ready to observe again. At present, the advantage of the swift flying Sword Saint against the galloping Sword Saint was obvious. The effect of the siege of the Fortress of Hands had not yet manifested, so he should keep a low profile for a while. When the effect of the siege was manifested, the swift flying Sword Saint would have to decide whether to fight or retreat. That would be the best time to intercept and kill. Let Fredo exhaust the swift flying Sword Saint for a while, then I will use the wind-calming divine bead and my superior archery skills to make a grand entrance. This went on for 2 days. The repeated attacks over the past 2 days had riddled the Fortress of Hands with thousands of holes, and one of the walls could collapse at any time. The swift flying Sword Saint LaSalle had also fought with the galloping Sword Saint Fredo 7 or 8 times. Although there was no clear winner, it was obvious that he was suppressing Fredo. However, these 7 or 8 sword battles had allowed List to see clearly, and he had a direct understanding of the swift flying Sword Saint's attack power. He is indeed very strong, but he is still a distance away from the Count. I can intervene in their battle. The Count he was referring to was the Wave Sword Saint Lee William. Therefore, before the next siege, he found Fredo and said, Viscount Fredo, in this siege, after we lure the swift flying Sword Saint out, I plan to intercept and kill him with you, and try to capture him or kill him. You're with me? Are you joking? Fredo's face was cold, and he said without hesitation, What a joke. You are just an Earth Knight. Maybe you will have a chance to fly in the sky in a few years, but a battle between Sword Saints is not something you can imagine. Indeed, the Sword Saint's attack power is very strong, and I can't withstand it. But my mount is also very strong. If I want to escape, even the Sword Saint can't catch up with me. Is that so? You can try. List's face also turned cold. He did not like to be ridiculed. List, Fredo. Roger quickly tried to smooth things over. He did not want the two to quarrel, but it did not work. Fredo sneered, Even Lee William would not dare to say that he can escape from me. Who gave you the guts to try and act tough in front of me? Words are not enough to prove anything, Fredo. List suddenly jumped out of the camp on his chocobo. Prepare to accept my challenge. With that, he quickly pulled the swift shadow bow into a full crescent shape, and knocked 3 arrows on the bowstring. They immediately flew towards the swift flying Sword Saint. Arrogant! Fredo leaped into the air and charged towards List. But List did not panic. He pulled the swift shadow bow again, and another 3 arrows scattered into the sky. After shooting the first wave, he jumped high into the air on his chocobo, gliding hundreds of meters away to avoid Fredo's attack. At the same time, he turned around and shot again, the trajectory of the arrows even more erratic. Just as Fredo was about to get up, the arrows were already in front of him, forcing him to use his sword to block the arrows. Such scenes happened one after another in the following period of time. Of course, List's archery did not cause any damage to the fully focused Sky Knight, but he could successfully block his opponent's attack rhythm. This allowed the chocobo to move around in circles around Fredo, and List could enjoy the joy of flying a kite. Damn it, I want to see how many arrows you can shoot. Sorry, I have enough arrows to shoot for half an hour. List replied loudly. In fact, he could shoot for half a day, because he still had a large number of arrows in the gem space. A quarter of an hour later, Roger rushed over and stopped the two from fighting. List was always shooting and felt that it was too wasteful. Fredo could not catch up to the chocobo and was also caught in a dilemma. Retracting his sword, he calmed his agitated high-level combat energy and looked coldly at List. I admit that I underestimated you. You have a good mount and your archery is good, but your fighting ability is like scratching an itch. What makes you think you can participate in a battle between sword saints? My fighting ability is not strong, but I can contain the sword saint's attack rhythm. And you should not forget I have 9 blizzard beasts. As long as I whistle, they will go crazy and hunt. Do you think I can leave a few transparent arrow holes or a few claw marks on your body? The kiting battle with Fredo Scimitar had significantly improved List's temperament. He had already measured that the sword saint was only SOSO. Chapter 472. However, List regretted it. The swift swordsman, who had suppressed Fredo in the sword fight, did not choose to fight to the death. Instead, he led the knight to escape to the Snaketooth City. The Snaketooth City was the central city of the Snaketooth mountain range. Next to it was the tall Snaketooth Castle, which stood between 2 mountains. It was easy to defend and difficult to attack. Obviously, Count Flying Goose seemed to have communicated with the Marquis of the Snaketooth to give up the strategic position of the Castle of Hands and retreat to the Snaketooth Castle. Count Peregrine Falcon also escaped. Many Sky Knights had gathered in the Snaketooth Castle. It would be difficult to attack it. Count Flying Goose escaped, and the Castle of Hands fell into our hands. List, thank you for your help. My mission was completed perfectly. From now on, I can occupy the Castle of Hands and threaten the safety of the Marquis of the Snaketooth's orders of chivalry. A large area of the territory is under the threat of our orders of chivalry. Roger Golden Oats was very excited. He hurriedly commanded the orders of chivalry to rush to the Castle of Hands. They had taken away all the supplies that could be taken away, but there were still a lot of equipment, food, utensils, and other supplies left in the castle. While the knights were busy counting the spoils, Roger made a decision in the following meeting. Roger then made a decision in the subsequent conference. Your contribution will be tied with Viscount Fredo's. Do you have any objections? No. List said calmly. Trembling Woods had played a huge role in the siege, but without Fredo to restrain the swift flying sword sage, it would have been impossible to attack the city safely. Hence, it was acceptable that their contributions were equal. As for the distribution of the spoils, I know you don't need a lot of ordinary supplies. How about we convert all of them into food and ship them to the 30 empty ships I will provide for you? Very good distribution plan. He was not calculative, and Roger was not mean. The distribution of battle achievements and spoils was quickly implemented. The knight took care of everything for List. After the meeting, he returned to his room and had a good rest. Although it was said to be resting, it was actually an abnormal movement in the position of his heart. An indescribable feeling spread from his heart, giving him a comfortable yet uncomfortable experience. He had no choice but to cancel his social engagements and carefully examine his body. The quest must have been completed, and the magical spark has sprouted, List thought as he closed the door. That was why he summoned the smoke mission. Quest completed. Reward: Sprout of Mana Fire Seed. As expected, then came a new smoke mission. Mission: The mana kindling that has sprouted will become a new life form that you yearn for day and night. Its growth requires a large amount of resources, but it can also bring you unlimited benefit. Please cooperate with the mana kindling to train. Reward: 1 bloodline fruit. A brand new life form that I've been thinking about day and night. Training together with the mana fire seed? Is it really going to grow into a fire dragon? List felt the change in his heart and pondered over the hint of the smoke mission. His blood was already boiling. because all kinds of signs showed that there was indeed a future fire dragon living in his body. What he needed now was to work hard to cultivate a fire dragon. There was no information about how a fire dragon was born, but according to the hint of the smoke mission, the mana kindling would definitely breed a fire dragon. He just didn't know how it would be bred. I hope I won't give birth to a fire dragon. That would be so embarrassing. Suppressing his excitement. His eyes stayed on the reward of the smoke mission, and his eyes suddenly lit up. Another bloodline fruit. The last bloodline fruit cultivated Dosen, an intermediate World of Warcraft, and also gave birth to 8 blizzard beasts. This time, who should I give the bloodline fruit to? He didn't know where the bloodline fruit would grow. If it was in his own territory, he couldn't reach it. He could only try his luck and see what creatures in his territory would eat the bloodline fruit. If it was on the battlefield, the targets he could choose from were basically clear. Dosen and the 8 little ones were good choices. Chocobo Loki was also a good choice. Blackblood Horse Dragon could also be cultivated with the bloodline fruit. He began to think. Who should he give it to? If possible, I certainly hope that Dosen eats the bloodline fruit and evolves further. But Dosen has already eaten a bloodline fruit in a short period of time. If he eats it again, I'm afraid the chances of failure will greatly increase. If he explodes and dies, it will be a big blow to me. It was too risky for Dosen to eat it. The 8 little ones were quite suitable. Even if one died, it wouldn't affect the overall situation. But considering that they were the descendants of Dosen who hadn't completely digested the bloodline fruit, their blood must still have resistance to the bloodline fruit, which was very dangerous. It doesn't make sense for Black Dragon to eat it. Turning it into World of Warcraft is just another low-level dragon. In fact, it's better to let Loki eat it. Loki is basically a low-level dragon in World of Warcraft. Once he evolves and becomes an intermediate dragon, his strength will take a qualitative leap. However, like Dosen and the 8 little ones, it would be a pity if Loki exploded and died. In World of Warcraft, dragons that were very suitable for riding were really hard to find. The Count had searched for many years but still couldn't find a suitable mount in World of Warcraft. It was clear how hard it was to find a good mount. Forget it, I won't think about it. When I find one, I'll decide whether to give it to the 8 little ones or to Loki. He returned his attention to his heart. He operated his chi, trying to feel the changes in the sprouting mana kindling. If the previous mana tinder was like a seed that could only absorb and not give back, then the mana tinder that he felt this time was more like a filter that could convert and convert energy. He could still feel it constantly absorbing the nutrients and mana in his body, but at the same time, it began to emit mana. A very special mana mixed with the chi that List operated, causing his chi to undergo some abnormal changes. His chi, which was originally moving at will, actually had a vague feeling that it was not listening to him. Especially when it was operating according to the flow of chi moves, there would be a great sense of sluggishness. The more complicated the flow, the stronger the sluggishness, and it was almost difficult to use chi moves. Even when he used the magic eye, he felt that it was not as smooth as before. This is bad. The mana kindling of the germinal mana kindling in my body seems to be excreting impurities, mixing with my pure chi, causing my control of chi to seriously decline. I'm afraid my current combat power has been greatly reduced, less than half of what it used to be. His face was serious. Although this situation was probably caused by the initial discomfort, it could be solved when he found a suitable training method. But it still made him aware of the seriousness of the problem. I can't participate in the battle anymore. In my current state, accidents are inevitable on the battlefield. The Fortress of Hands has fallen. Next, I just need to wait patiently for the Count to meet up with him and be a bystander on the battlefield. He had decided to pretend to be a salted fish for a while. Chapter 473. Time passed. It was already mid-November. It had been a month since they arrived on the mainland in mid-October, and the war in the Sardinia Bay area had spread for thousands of miles. The Grand Duchy of Sapphire's orders of chivalry were frantically looting everything, cooperating with the local mercenary corps to divide up the land's resource output and to transport materials and people back to the country. List's first batch of surf ships had returned to the territory with a lot of supplies, and the second batch had set sail early. Zambrata, the territory's diplomat, followed the fleet back. "Sir, before I set off, the two administrative officers, Advisor Gort and Isaiah and Blair, were doing their best to arrange the serfs' daily lives. The families of the Incorporated Knight were also well taken care of. The loss rate of serfs was not high, less than 400 people. The loss of 400 people cannot be said to be low, but with more careful care, the loss can certainly be further reduced." List sighed. His conscience was hurting. His role in the serf trade was equally disgraceful. Although he could cover it up by following the crowd, or make up for it with the future, he still could not be righteous. He had always been educated in modern civilization and had a normal view of the world. In the face of the impact of a wild and primitive civilization, his thoughts were always tangled. He wanted to be a saint, but he could not do it. When interests were placed in front of him, and his desire drove his instinct, he could only tilt his butt to the side of the aristocracy and fight for his own interests. He wanted to revolutionize, but he did not have the ability and courage to do so. Under the system of the Dragon Knight ruling the world, he was an ordinary person who could not even light up his engineering skills, let alone carry forward the Red Theory. It was more worth looking forward to advancing steadily towards the Dragon Knight and enjoying this wonderful life. Besides, the humans of this world were essentially not of the same origin as him, and he had no obligation to liberate all humans. "Zambrata, how is the situation in the territory?" "Everything is fine in the territory. By the way, sir, I almost forgot to tell you a great thing." Zambrata suddenly remembered something and said excitedly, "Shortly after you set off, the corn-grass sprite worm being cared for in the castle began to behave differently. The town officials and Mr. Carter unanimously determined that it had entered the pupa stage." "Really?" "Yes, by the time I set out, it had become very large and motionless. But it's hard to say whether it can evolve successfully. We can't see its internal situation. In order to prevent Ella from interfering with the corn-grass worm's evolution, Mr. Carter put the corn-grass worm in a jade box alone and let the Knight of the Territory take turns to guard it. It's a pity that I'm not by its side. We can only see how lucky it is and hope that the Knight's glory will bless the territory." List sighed again. In fact, even if he returned to his territory, there was not much he could do. He could help the sprite worm collect pheromones to increase the probability of its evolution. However, the success of the evolution depended entirely on the sprite worm itself. After reporting on the corn-grass worm, Zambrata reported on the construction of the territory. Then he said, after Advisor Gort and Sir Levis discussed, they used empty ships to transport a lot of materials to the mainland for trade. The territory has also shipped a batch of flower soap, snake blood fruit, high-quality charcoal, pottery, candy and other specialties. In addition, Madame Chris has shipped a batch of potions. Materials were used for trading, and he could earn a little. What made List happy was this batch of potions. He now had to feed a man and a dragon, and it was the budding magic fire seed. The burden was too great. Without a lot of potions, it was very difficult to practice. During this time, he was exploring how to practice with the magic fire seed. He found that if he wanted to improve his control of his chi, he had to first serve the budding magic fire seed and excrete a lot of impurities. This impurities had a strange property that could greatly change the shape of his chi. It gradually changed to a higher form of chi. At first, He suspected that this gradual change was from intermediate qi to advanced qi, but he found that it was not the case. In other words, the change in form was another level of change, far more than the gradual change from intermediate qi to advanced qi. He had to wonder if it was gradually becoming a dragon qi. Unfortunately, no one could tell him what a dragon qi was. He could only explore it on his own and gradually found some clues. He had a lot of understanding of the magic fire seed, and soon he could officially start a new practice. If it was someone else who encountered this situation, I am afraid it would take a year to explore the changes. Unfortunately, he met me. Relying on scientific conclusions, the changes in Do Qi cannot escape my sharp observation. Subduing a brand new Do Qi will not be long in the future. His greatest talent was to surpass the world's scope and knowledge. After successively capturing the fragrant chariot castle and the castle of hands, Liszt entered the state of a salted fish. In fact, the Coral Island orders of chivalry, which was in the limelight, gradually became low-key, no longer capturing the castle, only occasionally robbing some small mines and small city supplies. He followed Marquis Roderick, took in some knights, and did some material trading. In a flash, it was almost December. After half a month of exploration, Liszt finally explored a new way of practice and completely mastered the new qi in his body. This fire-attributed qi vaguely had the nature of a fire dragon magic. The burning ability was stronger, the dissipation speed was slower, the qi power was greater, and it was easier to break through the total amount of qi when taking elixirs. He really suspected that his qi was evolving into a dragon qi. As for whether the dragon qi was in such a form or not, he still did not know. He operated the new qi and displayed a set of fiery dragon drill, with greatly increased power. He summoned the smoke mission. Mission completed. Reward, a bloodline fruit. Phew, the mission is finally completed. Next, I should walk around and look for the bloodline fruit. Liszt breathed a sigh of relief, and could not wait to leave the nameless castle where he was stationed. He also checked the new smoke mission. The first expansion order has been in effect for a month. As the temperature gradually drops, the war between the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom and the Eagle Kingdom has come to an end. You can choose to say goodbye to the salted fish and wait patiently for the end of the war. Reward, unknown reward. Another unknown reward. It seems that festivals and wars always bring unknown rewards. The unknown reward of the first festival was the Siren Qi. The unknown reward of the second battle of Iron Hoof Island was the Dragon Bone recovery. These were all very important rewards, which made him look forward to the unknown reward this time. While he could continue to be a salted fish, he still put all his energy into looking for the bloodline fruit. Basically, there were few bloodline fruits in the human reclaimed areas, they were all in the forest. Therefore, Chapter 474. After hunting for 2 days in a row, Liszt still couldn't find the bloodline fruit, which made him feel frustrated. 2 days have passed since the reward. The blood fruit has probably already been born. It can only exist for 5 minutes. If it was born in the territory, it might be eaten by some animals and become World of Warcraft. If it was born around here, I'm afraid it has already disappeared. The blood fruit had a time limit. When it was ripe, it would fall to the ground. After 5 minutes, its magic power would be completely lost, and it would become an ordinary fruit. With disappointment, he continued to hunt. Although his hope was getting smaller and smaller, he did not give up. After all, there was nothing to be busy with as a salted fish. All he needed to do was wait for the Grand Duchy of Sapphire to announce the end of the Orders of Chivalry. The Sardinia Bay area had been turned into a mess by the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. After the winter snow came, the war would be meaningless. It was not a good choice to charge in the snow. Just when he was a little distracted, a voice suddenly rang out. In the vision of the magic eye, there was a flash of magic light. After a long time, he came back to his senses and immediately turned Loki's head to search for the magic light. Soon, after crossing a bush, he came to the place where the magic light came from. Woof woof! Woof woof! The 8 little ones immediately barked wildly. Loki also clucked and clucked. They all found something that radiated magic, which was of great value. It was a green fruit, growing on the branch of a short shrub, exuding a strong greenish-gray magic light. Obviously, this was the blood fruit that List had been looking for. However, it was not ripe yet. Alert! List quickly responded. Charles, spread out the night squad and guard this bush. Protect the good thing I found. Yes, my lord, Charles shouted. He then led the night squad and strictly guarded the surrounding bushes for possible World of Warcraft. He saw the strange green fruit. For a tree that should not bear fruit to bear such a large fruit, there was no doubt that it was a bloodline fruit that was worth 1,000 gold coins. The Lords Dosen had eaten a bloodline fruit in World of Warcraft that could change beasts and World of Warcraft bloodlines. Unfortunately, the success rate of the bloodline fruit was not high. Otherwise, its value would be calculated in dragon coins. Anyone who discovered an unripened bloodline fruit and reported it to the Lord would receive a large reward. However, since this fruit was discovered by the Lord of World Warcraft, there was no reward for them. All they could do was to protect the bloodline fruit from World of Warcraft's invasion. Woof woof! Clatter! The 8 little ones and Loki were still barking. List directly shouted, "Blizzard Beast, shut up! Loki, shut up!" His usual authority was on full display at this moment. The 8 little ones and Loki all quietened down, but their eyes were still staring at the bloodline fruit. While the bloodline fruit was not yet ripe, List quickly thought about who should eat it. The last bloodline fruit I found was a golden bloodline fruit, and its magic power seemed to be inclined to the earth attribute. This time, the bloodline fruit is a green fruit, and its magic power is greenish-gray, which seems to be inclined to the wind attribute. The bloodline fruit did not have a strict classification of attribute. It was a chaotic attribute, but from the appearance of its color, it was more or less inclined to the wind attribute. The 8 little ones were all of the earth attribute, and only Loki was of the wind attribute. Letting out a breath, he had decided who the bloodline fruit would belong to. I will give it to Loki. The 8 little ones are just a united front. If I give it to anyone, it will be unfair. I might as well not give it to anyone. If Loki eats the bloodline fruit and becomes a mid-level dragon, wouldn't it be a big profit? So, he directly issued an order, "Blizzard Beast, no eating." Woof woof. The 8 little ones expressed their dissatisfaction. List glared at them. "Shut up, or I will release Dosen to teach you a lesson." The 8 little ones whimpered in grievance, not daring to express their complaints anymore. They grew up under List's carrot and stick dog training policy, and they had long been afraid to offend List's majesty. Besides, their most feared father Dosen had always been on List's side. After leaving Loki's back, List touched its anxious head. "When it ripens, you can eat it." Loki seemed to understand and shouted loudly, "Cluck!" 5 minutes later, a strong fragrance emanated from the bloodline fruit, which meant that it was not far from ripening. In the vision of the magic eye, he also saw that the magic power inside the bloodline fruit was getting richer and richer, almost to the point of dripping out. At this moment, the knight on guard outside suddenly issued a warning signal. World of Warcraft found a large number of windblade wolves, at least 20. List raised his eyebrows. 8 little ones, get ready to fight and hunt all the windblade wolves. He had been short on World of Warcraft meat recently, and was looking forward to World of Warcraft to deliver meat. Sure enough, a group of low-level World of Warcraft windblade wolves, widely distributed in the forests of the continent, began to do good deeds. The 8 little ones' hair stood up in an instant, ready to pounce on the Windblade wolves. They poured out their anger at not being able to eat the bloodline fruit on the Windblade wolves. A moment later, the battle was triggered. The Windblade wolves were attracted by the bloodline fruit and brazenly attacked. The 8 little ones, in order to vent their anger, madly attacked. It was easy for mid-level magical beasts to bully low-level magical beasts. In just a short period of time, 7 Windblade wolves were strangled by the blizzard beast. Only one was smart enough to escape, but it could not avoid the rock thorns on the ground. Such a scene. With the 8 little ones attacking and the Earth Knight assisting, List did not need to pay attention at all. He was waiting for the bloodline fruit to ripen. Loki was also anxiously circling around the bush. He knew that the bloodline fruit was about to ripen, and this was an opportunity to change his fate. Suddenly, a rustling sound came from the sky. List looked up and saw a group of bats flashing with magic light flying over. Oh no, it's the black bats! A group of low-level World of Warcraft with the dark attribute, able to cast the dark magic decay. This dark magic seemed to accelerate the decay of objects by draining water. There were records in the magic books that civilians were attacked by the black bats and quickly became withered corpses. He quickly took out the swift shadow bow and shot an arrow, aiming at the black bats. However, the black bats were agile and seemed to have ultrasonic positioning, allowing them to quickly dodge the arrows. List often shot out 9 arrows in 3 waves before he could shoot down a black bat. It was not enough to kill more than 20 black bats in a short period of time. During the battle, the tempting fragrance was extremely rich. The bloodline fruit had ripened. The black bats madly swooped down to the bloodline fruit, trying to snatch such a treasure. List had already shot as fast as he could, but he still could not stop them. It's over. The bloodline fruit is going to be taken by these bastards. When a black bat approached the bloodline fruit, List could not help but grit his teeth in anger. However, Loki, who was guarding at the side, suddenly flapped his wings and rushed towards the black bats like a warrior. Waves of green magic rolled up from his body and directly scattered the black bats. Then, with lightning speed, he bit the bloodline fruit that was about to fall to the ground and jumped, dodging the decay of the black bats. Clatter! After winning the battle of fate, Loki madly ran towards List. List directly jumped on him, pulled out the sky cutter greatsword, and used a prairie fire slash. A rain of fire suddenly hit the black bats and scattered them. With Loki's perfect jump, he began to clear the black bats. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.